Chapter 139. Why won't you let me speak? No one knows better than me how powerful Jiyu Nan is, the sun demon said in a deep voice. With his help, we'll be able to eliminate the moon slaves more easily. The little lowly moon demon shook her head. There's no such person in the ancestors' prophecy. The only one who can end the moon slaves is our contractor. Prophecies are never completely accurate, Little Ming retorted. Although he never spoke much in front of others, he did not have a bad temper in front of the moon demon that lived with him. In fact, he would even refute her. The moon demon shook her head. That guy. We know nothing about him. It's better to keep our contractor away from him. The advancement to the west of the city was smoother than expected. In just 2 hours, they arrived at the source of the anomaly shown on the map. This caused everyone's spirits to rise slightly. Even Lin Duo, who had a gloomy expression, revealed a curious expression. The thing that caused the mutation of the moon slaves was soon revealed to everyone. Contrary to everyone's expectations, it was actually a towering azure tree that towered into the sky. It looked as if it was carved out of a gem. It was so beautiful that it seemed unreal. This is a moon slave. No, I should say it's like a moon slave. It's an entity made entirely of moon energy, Jiyu Zhaoyu said immediately. Like many elemental creatures, moon slaves were individuals with a single rule. Their bodies were made of moon energy. However, there was no moon element in this world, so they were not considered elemental creatures. The reason why moon slaves were called moon slaves was because they would often worship the night sky due to their own power. The mutated moon slaves were contaminated, so they could not feel the moon. However, the giant tree in front of them was reproducing this scene. The moon slaves were all over the mountains. Their bodies glowed in red and blue as they quietly prostrated themselves under the giant tree. The arrival of the people from the Star Moon camp seemed to have triggered these moon slaves. They began to raise their heads and look in their direction. The eyes of the moon slaves glowed brightly, causing everyone's scalps to go numb. Let's go. At Jiyu Zhaoyu's order, everyone ran for their lives without hesitation. It was as if they would be torn into pieces if they were a step slower. Lin Duo was still in a daze when she was dragged away by the sun and moon twin demons. A quantitative change would lead to a qualitative change. The number of moon slaves gathered here was just too terrifying. Even the most elite team would be overwhelmed in an instant. No wonder I didn't feel much pressure along the way. Jiyu Zhaoyu sighed inwardly. I'm afraid that all the moon slaves gathered nearby have squeezed into that area. But, what exactly is that? The image of the huge tree flashed across Jiyu Zhaoyu's mind. She turned around and looked behind her. Does that person have a way to deal with so many moon slaves? Jiyu Nan naturally had a way. Even though the moon slaves in this area were so densely packed that it was inconvenient for him to use hidden shadow to sneak in, Jiyu Nan still had many ways to deal with them. He could use shadow body to lure the monsters and slowly kill off the moon slaves. He could also use shadow body to forcefully break through the moon slaves and then switch to his original body. However, he chose the simplest option. Fly in. Yes, moon slaves had a very awkward weakness. Because they were generally weak, there were no moon slaves with the ability to fly until now. The Morning Star heroic spiritualists did not train themselves much, so there were very few who had the ability to fly. It was the same even for the third rank. There were quite a few heroic spiritualists who could fly, but they could not carry people, could not attack for long, and could only fly at low altitudes. Only Jiyu Nan, a visitor from another world, was familiar with flying. Even in the astral realm, flying was almost an instinct of transcendence. Just like that, Jiyu Nan flew in unhurriedly from midair. The moon slaves on the ground began to roar, but could do nothing to him. They were not completely helpless. At the very least, many moon slaves were thrown up by their companions in an attempt to attack Jiyu Nan. However, Jiyu Nan was not one of those weak helicopters in the army. Even if these moon slaves could reach him, what was the point? After a while, Jiyu Nan arrived in front of the giant tree. Rather than saying that they're worshipping this tree, it's better to say that they're waiting for the fruits on it. Jiyu Nan could see clearly that there were many blue fruits growing on the branches of the giant tree. Each of them was crystal clear and had the same color as the giant tree, making it difficult to distinguish them from afar. This towering tree was so tall that the moon slaves could not reach the fruits. They could not even get close to the tree, and could only wait for the fruits to fall on their own. Even without using his senses, he could feel the astonishing power coming from the fruits. Could the sons of moon slaves be made from something like this? How did this tree grow? Doubts flashed through Ji Yunan's mind. However, Ji Yunan's hand did not stop. He reached out and plucked a fruit from the tree, then threw it into the crowd of moon slaves. The entire scene seemed to go silent for a moment. In the next moment, there were probably more than 100,000 moon slaves in this area, and they all rioted. Screams, roars, and the sound of tearing could be heard everywhere. Countless moon slaves swarmed toward the place where the fruit had fallen. The lucky one who had been hit by the fruit immediately opened his mouth and swallowed the fruit. Unfortunately, he did not have time to digest the fruit, and he was torn apart by his companions in the blink of an eye. After all, the lucky one would not go far. One of the characteristics of moon slaves was that they could devour and assimilate each other. However, they did not have the tendency to devour their companions. In ancient times, moon slaves were not so common that they had not been discovered. Ji Yunan was aware of this. Tian Yuan had used this method to forcefully implant polluting information into the bodies of moon slaves. It was the same now. The fruit's power had not been digested, but it was still contained in the lucky one's body. Hence, his companions continued to devour and assimilate it. The moon slave that had eaten him was torn apart and eaten by more moon slaves. The nature of the energy transformation meant that the fruit's power was not lost at all. It was only dispersed into the bodies of the moon slaves. This power was a fatal temptation to the moon slaves. The moon slaves continued to attack each other. In the short span of a few breaths, more than 100,000 moon slaves had been turned into large pieces of broken corpses. The number of moon slaves was decreasing, and the fruit's power was becoming more concentrated. The final victor was about to be decided. Ji Yunan had been watching all this coldly from the sidelines. At this moment, he could not help but feel excited. Could it be that the one who was born from the fruit would be the son of moon slave? Following a deafening roar, a huge moon slave that was as tall as 3 or 4 people finally bit its opponent to death and enjoyed the fruit's power for itself. The evil god's temple in Ji Yunan's mind trembled slightly, and a message was transmitted. Side mission: upgrade the King of Moon Slaves to the 3rd level. Chapter 140. Another side quest had appeared, which meant that the instance dungeon's rewards would be raised to another level. This was something to be happy about. However, there was something called a psychological gap. Ji Yunan had been looking forward to completing the main quest, but he did not expect that the quest that he had gone through so much difficulty to complete was not to kill the target. However, one of the characteristics of a professional player was that they would never lose their composure. No matter how many traps there were, they would step on them all at least once, and one day they would clear the game. Ji Yunan quickly calmed down and carefully observed the monster in front of him. The power of the giant tree fruit was digested and absorbed by the power of 100,000 moon slaves, and then gathered into the body of a single individual. The final result was that the body of the victor in front of Ji Yunan was twisting and changing wildly, sometimes taking a human form, and sometimes twisting into strange lines. Towards the end, it even turned into a flat surface, and then rapidly expanded. A terrifying aura spread out, and no living creature dared to approach it. Only Ji Yunan continued to silently observe it. Ji Yunan knew that the fruit alone would not have such an effect, and that was because there were too many moon slaves gathered here. Half an hour later, the giant moon slave finally stopped changing, and its body stopped at a height of almost 5 meters. Although it was not as exaggerated as when it expanded, it was still much taller than a normal moon slave, and it was extremely eye-catching. Its appearance was also very different from before. It was no longer the humanoid appearance of a moon slave, and there was no obvious animalization. What was strange was that it had something else. 2 arms and a pair of wings. This fellow, who was called the Moon Slave King by the evil god's temple, not only had a new pair of arms under his ribs, but also a pair of wings on his back, making him look majestic. However, from Ji Yunan's point of view, he was actually not that powerful. In fact, He had only just reached level 2, and was about the same level as the current moon slaves. The fruit did not seem to give him power, but more like evolution. Ji Nan plucked another fruit and threw it in front of him, smiling. Do you still want to eat it? The moon slave king looked at it doubtfully, then sniffed it twice with his nose. He then shook his head and pushed the fruit aside, but gave Ji Nan a flattering smile. Although his smile was a little ugly, it was enough to move Ji Nan. Did it actually develop intelligence? Would killing him be considered as completing the mission? This was the first thought that popped up in Ji Nan's mind. His gaze suddenly became dangerous, but it scared the moon slave king so much that he shrank back. However, he immediately rejected this idea. Firstly, this big guy was the king of moon slaves recognized by the evil god's temple. Secondly, he did not fit Tian Yuan's definition of a son of moon slave. When humans are corrupted, those who maintain their intelligence are the sons of moon slaves. Ji Nan picked up the fallen fruit from the ground and the rest of the fruits on the tree. There were only 5 or 6 of them in total. He then left with the king of moon slaves. This big guy seemed to be very happy to follow behind Ji Nan. I'll call you number 1 for now. Forget it, I'll just call you Big Baby, Ji Nan said as he looked at the 6 fruits in his hand. Star Moon Camp, Lin Juo's home. Lin Ku sat in front of the coffee table at home, holding a cup of black tea in her hand, but she could not drink it no matter how hard she tried. On the other hand, the man sitting opposite her looked much calmer than she did. Just as Lin Ku's irritation became more and more obvious, and the man was about to speak, the display screen in front of them suddenly lit up, but then dimmed again. Both of them perked up at the same time and quickly checked it. This was the last photo sent back by the person who had gone to explore the laboratory. The technology in the Morning Star plane was not very advanced, and it was not yet at the level of a live broadcast. The 2 photos were quickly developed. The first one was actually pitch black, which made people scratch their heads in confusion. Why is it pitch black? Could it be that he has already entered the laboratory, and the environment inside is completely dark? The man frowned as he analyzed the situation. Lin Ku did not speak, but she somewhat agreed with him. However, when they saw the second photo, they suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. The angle of the second photo was very strange. It seemed to be taken close to the ground, and at the front of the picture was a pair of legs that were still standing. Both of them were very sure that these were the legs of the explorer. The location of the photo was on the explorer's forehead, which meant that his head had been chopped off. This detail sent a chill down their spines. The background of the second photo was even more shocking. There were countless huge breeding pods. Some were empty, but some were still operating, and what was placed inside were moon slave. He really raised moon slaves in the middle of the camp. This Jiu Jiaoyu is really daring. The man could not help but snort softly, but there was a hint of pride in his voice. This alone was enough to throw Star Moon Camp into chaos. If they used this photo to negotiate with Jiu Jiaoyu, they might even be able to turn him into one of their own. Lin Ku was equally shocked, but she quickly frowned and said, "Something's not right. Why isn't there an enemy in front of him? Maybe he was ambushed from behind. What's so strange about that?" The man said disdainfully. In the photo, only the shadow of the explorer was slowly elongated in front of the legs. There were no traces of the enemy, but this could be explained. That's not right. The decapitated head is behind him, which means that the enemy should be in front. Could it be an invisibility ability? Lin Ku was still frowning, but before she could say anything, footsteps were heard, and the man suddenly disappeared. "I'm back." Lin Juo's listless voice was heard. She slowly opened the door and walked in. Lin Ku acted as if nothing had happened. She put away the 2 photos and walked over with a surprised look. "Why are you back so soon? I thought you were going to spend the night." Lin Juo threw herself into her sister's arms, almost crying out loud. She was full of grievances, but she did not know where to start. The people of Star Moon Camp returned much faster than before. After all, they were running for their lives, and they could not care less about the dangers around them. With the help of the sun and moon monsters, Lin Juo had no trouble running back to the camp. It was just that the adventure they had gone through so much trouble ended like this, which made the hopeful girl feel helpless. Lin Ku comforted her. "I'll heat up the dinner. Eat first, and then we'll talk." Lin Duo nodded with a sob, and Lin Duo went to the kitchen. After a while, she picked up the food and turned around, only to find that Lin Duo was standing behind her. "What are you doing? You scared me." Lin Ku rolled her eyes and said while touching her chest. "I just wanted to see what delicious food there is." Lin Duo seemed to have recovered a little, and a smile appeared on her face. Lin Ku said helplessly, "Don't stick so close to me next time." Lin Ku seemed to understand something, and her left hand shook violently. The porcelain bowl suddenly fell to the ground with a bang. Chapter 141. Just when Lin Ku finally understood the meaning of the photo and was in deep thought, Ji Yunan was sitting in his lab, and a shadow was standing beside him, slowly merging into his body. The shadow body had many uses. In the past, Ji Yunan could only use it as a support in battle, but after his profound meaning was unlocked, he could use it for other things. For example, he could create many shadow bodies to carry out different orders. Ji Yunan was currently doing this. One was stationed at Lin Duo's side, and one was placed in the lab. However, unlike when the shadow body was near, it could only carry out some simple orders once it was far away from the body. For example, on Lin Duo's side, it was to protect Lin Duo from death, while in the lab, it was to kill all intruders. When Ji Yunan merged the shadow body back into his body, everything the shadow body saw and heard became memories that he could read and browse. A few bugs. Ji Yunan's slightly cold gaze swept across the faces of the intruders, but there was no one he was familiar with or interested in. After being beheaded by the shadow body, their bodies were still left in the lab, taken by Jiyu Zhaoyu for investigation. A moment later, Jiyu Zhaoyu's figure walked into the center of the lab and came to Ji Yunan's side. "Sir, I've investigated. Before the apocalypse broke out, these people all came from an organization called Nighthawks." Jiyu Zhaoyu did not waste any time and said directly, "Nighthawks." Jiyu Zhaoyu nodded and handed over a document. For intelligence on an entire organization like this, an oral description would never be as comprehensive as a written one. Ji Yunan quickly scanned through the document, but he did not miss any of the information. A faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. An organization whose mission is to overthrow the federal government, but doesn't even dare to carry out a terrorist attack? Ji Yunan evaluated in disdain. Nighthawks had absolute freedom as the purpose of the organization, and they had always been fighting against the government. However, the most eye-catching thing they did was to kidnap a top tycoon, and they even let him go in the end. If it were Ji Yunan, he would dare to say, "Give me 30 players, and I'll even steal the wives of the heads of state for you to see." Throwing the files of the Nighthawks aside, Ji Yunan said to Jiyu Zhaoyu, "Ignore them. Come and see our new comrades of the revolution." "Eldest brother." Ji Yunan waved at him. Jiyu Zhaoyu raised her head in confusion. Then, her eyes almost popped out. He saw a big fellow that was 4 to 5 times the size of a normal moon slave. It had a pair of wings on its back and 4 arms on its body. It was striding toward him, causing the floor to tremble. "My lord, is this moon slave?" If not for the fact that the other party's aura was too distinct, Jiyu Zhaoyu wouldn't have dared to recognize him. "This is the king of moon slaves," Ji Yunan corrected. "Our king of moon slaves, eldest baby." Eldest child smiled at Jiyu Zhaoyu in a simple and honest manner, and then looked at Ji Yunan with eager eyes. Ji Yunan waved his hand, and the giant shadow hand grabbed a moon slave from the petri dish and tossed it in front of elder baby. The latter grabbed the moon slave and started gnawing on it without hesitation. This moon slave was still alive. When half of its head was bitten off, it had completely woken up and was struggling in pain. Of course, its strength was no match for eldest baby. No matter how much it struggled, it couldn't escape its fate. In the blink of an eye, the moon slave had been swallowed by elder baby. Not even a bone was left behind. Only the echoing screams and the bloodstains on the ground proved that the moon slave had survived. Even though Jiyu Zhaoyu was a hero spirit, he was shocked by this scene. This was because he could clearly sense that after eldest baby ate this moon slave, his strength had increased slightly. Eating moon slaves could increase one's strength. There were still thousands of moon slaves waiting outside. He couldn't help but look at Ji Yunan. Where did my lord find such a monster? That tree. But it's not enough to just have eldest baby. Ji Yunan didn't care about his thoughts. After elder baby saw him, he said, "Give me the addresses of the other 2 camps." "My lord, you want to..." Ji Yunan didn't speak, but the endless bloodthirst in his eyes was enough to show what he wanted to do. In the Camp of Glory, a group of people in military uniforms were having a meeting around a round table. There were men and women, old and young, but they all had one thing in common: they were soldiers. They were no longer amateurs commanding experts, but real soldiers. The arrival of the apocalypse had an unexpected benefit for the military. Those who only knew how to eat and do nothing could no longer hold high positions. Only those who were truly capable could be promoted. The 11 people sitting here were all the leaders of their respective troops. They were the ones who led a group of soldiers to fight for a path of survival without a commander. However, at this moment, these 11 soldiers all had grim expressions. The news that Zhu Long and Fang Xiao's troops had been annihilated in West City had finally reached them. Although there were no witnesses, the corpses were still there. It was obvious whether they were killed by the moon slave or their comrades. "How dare you? How dare you?" An old man slammed the table angrily. "This Jiyu Jiaoyu has no regard for the law. Elder Yang, the most important thing now is how we should deal with the Star Moon Camp." A young man next to him said with a frown. Glory and Bravehearts were actually a family now. Both sides had chosen to ally, and Zhu Long and Fang Xiao were their representatives. There's no doubt about Zhu Long's strength. The Star Moon Camp could annihilate them all. Whether it's a sneak attack or something else, we can't act rashly. We can't act rashly. Are we just going to sit here and wait for death? With the moon slave here, their main force won't be able to come over. The result of the 11 people's meeting was that no one could convince anyone, especially when they were faced with a dilemma. Stop arguing. In the end, it was the oldest and most reputable elder who spoke up. Everyone else followed his words and stopped talking. "Elder He, come up with a countermeasure." "Elder He, I'll listen to you." Elder He looked around at everyone and nodded lightly. "Instead of arguing here, why don't we..." Before Elder He finished speaking, everyone suddenly felt a breeze blow past. A figure actually appeared at the side of the round table. This person was wearing a grey suit and was expressionless. He was holding an azure fruit in his hand. The 11 soldiers stood up at the same time, and a few of them shouted, "Who are you? How did you get in?" The person's calm gaze swept across the surroundings, but he did not answer their question. He only revealed a faint smile. "Not bad material. I hope the second child won't disappoint me." As he spoke, he released the restriction in his hand, and the aura of the fruit began to slowly dissipate. Everyone could not understand what he was saying, but as the aura dissipated, everyone could clearly feel the tremor that seemed to come from an endless distance. Chapter 142. A strange aura was slowly emitted from the fruit. Even though none of the people present recognized what that fruit was, the extremely dense and deep power it emitted was sufficient to astonish them. Ji Yunan's expression did not change even the slightest when questioned or scolded. The next moment, 11 shadow figures stood up from behind the crowd and raised their swords. One of them ran away. Ji Yunan sat still and looked to the side. A young figure was running away quickly. However, he did not run for long before a shadow figure caught up with him and hacked him to death. With Ji Yunan's current power, dealing with these heroic spiritualists who lacked power was like beating up a child. Ji Yunan's body floated up again and stood in mid-air. He left the fruit on the table. He was not worried that it would be taken away because no one could walk out of this campsite alive. Attracted by the fruit's power, countless moon slaves started to run toward the campsite. Those who dared to stand in their way could only be torn apart. The people in the Glory campsite were in trouble. The overwhelming number of moon slaves swarmed toward them. Many humans did not even have the chance to escape and were directly drowned in the tide of moon slaves. As for those who had the ability to resist, most of them were bitten to death and turned into moon slaves. Faced with an absolute advantage in numbers, most people were powerless. "Xiaowu, run, run quickly. A woman struggled and shouted as she threw a little boy away with all her might. However, before she could finish her sentence, a few moon slaves had already dragged her away. Hearing the clear chewing sounds coming from behind him, Xiaowu, who had just turned 7, ran forward with all his might with tears in his eyes. He lowered his head and did not dare to look back. Fear and hatred intertwined in his heart. The pain of watching his mother die without being able to do anything made him feel extremely pained. I also want to become a heroic spiritualist. I want to fight like my father, too. Before Xiaowu could finish his thoughts, he suddenly stopped. He had already arrived at the center of the campsite, in front of the round table conference. The fruit emitted a faint blue light, while Ji Nan calmly floated in midair. Xiaowu had never heard of any of these words, but it did not prevent him from imagining similar scenes. He shouted at the sky, "Uncle, please save me, I." Before Xiaowu's voice could travel far, a moon slave appeared behind him and tore him into 2 halves. Ji Nan looked down in confusion, only to see a small figure torn apart. He said with some regret, "I still don't know if it's a lowly." In the laboratory of the Star Moon Camp, Jiu Jiaoyu was nowhere to be seen. Tian Tian was still tied to the central pillar. She had not been able to rest for the whole night. Her physical exhaustion made her tired and hungry. Her lips were chapped, and she didn't want to say a word. But at this moment, a large head swayed back and forth in front of her, holding up the corpse of a moon slave. Half of the head had been split open, and it almost reached her face. "You, get lost." Tian Tian was so disgusted by the brain that she vomited stomach acid again. Then she roared at eldest baby, "How many times have I told you, I don't eat this?" Eldest baby looked at the corpse of the moon slave in his hand in confusion. With his simple intelligence, he could not understand the concept of taste. Also locked in the laboratory by Ji Nan, eldest baby had no one else to communicate with, so he had to play with Tian Tian. When Tian Tian showed that she was hungry and thirsty, eldest baby smashed a petri dish, grabbed the moon slave out of it, tore it into pieces, and gave it to her. Student Tian Tian cooperated and fainted. When she woke up, she was faced with such a situation. She had to communicate with a mentally handicapped eldest baby, with unknown consequences. The glory camp was quickly destroyed, and the remaining humans kept retreating to the center. Many people found out where Ji Nan was, and also the fruit. They didn't need to think too much to know who the culprit behind all of this was. But what about it? Ji Nan just stood calmly in the sky, and did not respond to their curses or pleas. As for those who tried to get close to the fruit, naturally, none of them were spared. Regardless of gender, age, or gender, Ji Nan made life equal, they would all die anyway. About half an hour later, a second tall moon slave king stood in front of Ji Nan, but this time, the evil god temple did not give him a side mission. Then, let's go to the next place, second baby. A sinister and flattering smile appeared on second baby's face. His personality was completely different from eldest baby's. "Can you help me untie the rope?" Tian Tian said to eldest baby. Her big round eyes told him that she needed help. Eldest baby scratched the back of his head in confusion. He had no idea what she was talking about. With eldest baby's intelligence, the most he could understand was that he was hungry. He could not count on anything else. Tian Tian was furious. She pushed her head back and moved her hands up and down, trying to attract eldest baby's attention to the rope. Obviously, eldest baby misunderstood her. He raised his hand and slapped the pillar. His monstrous strength made the pillar shake, and Tian Tian was so shaken that her whole body was shaking. She shook her head repeatedly to stop eldest baby from doing it again. Eldest baby seemed to realize that he had done something wrong. He scratched his head honestly. Lin Ku sat alone in her house with a gloomy expression. Lin Duo had already fallen asleep. She finally had the chance to do her own thing. There's an obvious vibration coming from the central lab. Even some of the residents nearby felt it. A voice came into her ears. It was the man in black from before. "You." Lin Ku's expression changed. She forced herself to speak in a low voice. "I devil, who allowed you to enter my house?" The man called I devil sneered, "I'm here. What do you want?" Lin Ku's anger slowly disappeared, but her gaze became dangerous. Exposing herself in front of her sister was better than being threatened by this man. Devil seemed to know what she was thinking. She coughed and said, Lord Ghost Tree will visit the lab in 15 minutes. That's all I have to say. As soon as she finished her words, Devil disappeared without a trace. Lin Ku's eyes were burning with anger. But a moment later, her figure also quickly disappeared into the night. At this moment, a figure slowly walked out from the second floor. It was Lin Duo, and Sun Devil and Moon Devil were beside her. Sister, did she go to the lab? Lin Duo did not forget what Tian Tian had told her. So, are we going there? Sun Devil's soft voice sounded in her ears. It was like the whisper of the devil from the abyss, full of temptation. Chapter 143. Ji Yunan's operation was not going well. The scene of 100,000 moon slaves gathering during the creation of Elder Baby was too difficult to replicate. Only God knew when the giant tree appeared and how long it took to gather the moon slaves. Ever since the fruits were collected by Ji Yunan, their power was still slowly draining despite being sealed with shadow energy. Ji Yunan did not have the time to wait any longer. Especially after they were taken out, their power would quickly dissipate. Therefore, he had to choose a place with a lot of people and use them to turn into moon slaves to gather as much power as possible. After nearly 2 hours of running, there were 5 moon slave kings of different sizes standing in front of Ji Yunan. They were created by Ji Yunan using the human survivors gathered in the camps. It could be said that each of them was stained with the blood of thousands of people. Glory and Bravehearts created second baby and third baby. They were the 2 largest among the 5. The other 3 camps were much weaker. Sixth baby was only the height of 2 people and was not much stronger than a normal moon slave. There are no camps in the imperial capital that can be considered big. Ji Yunan shook his head helplessly. Do I have to make do? No, there's actually one more. Lin Duo sneaked to the vicinity of the laboratory. It was pitch black inside and outside. Lin Duo gritted her teeth. She did not do something as stupid as turning on her flashlight. She sneaked in through a small door and walked forward step by step under the moonlight. This was her school. However, the path she was familiar with was unusually long. She could not reach the end even after walking for a long time. Xiao Ming, Xiao Yu. Am I under an illusion? She could not help but call out to her heroic spirit. You just can't walk anymore. The sun monster Xiao Ming appeared and pointed out coldly. Lin Duo's legs were trembling. Of course, she could not walk anymore. Lin Duo could not help but blush. Just as she was about to retort, she heard a sudden loud noise. She quickly looked up in shock. She saw an ancient tree slowly opening at the entrance of the laboratory. That was the sound of the door falling. This. Lin Duo quickly held her breath and hid in the dark to observe. Ghost Tree, do we need to take care of Lin Ku? Devil was standing next to an old man in a red robe. The old man pushed up the glasses on his face and shook his head. The lab is more important. Jiu Jiaoyu will be back soon. He looked up at the shadow in the distance, his heart cold. Devil didn't know, but he did. This was the birthplace of the moon slave disaster. Little Snow, Little Tien. In the next moment, the old man restrained all his emotions and said coldly, let's go. In the laboratory, Tian Tian went through a lot of hardships and finally solved herself. When eldest baby handed her the 4th moon slave's corpse, Tian Tian finally stopped fainting. She finally discovered the opportunity to escape. The moon slave's body was full of glass shards from the broken walls of the cultivation chamber. So, Tian Tian resisted the nausea, held a fragment in her mouth, and cut the rope in front of her bit by bit. When she could finally free her hands, the corners of her mouth were already full of blood. She wiped the corner of her mouth with her hand and felt a burning pain, but she didn't feel frustrated at all. Ji Yunan. Tian Tian gritted her teeth as the face appeared in her mind. When I get out, I'll tell the world about your evil deeds. Bang. The door of the laboratory was suddenly blown open. The old man in the red robe and Devil walked in. The two seemed to have understood something when they saw Tian Tian's miserable condition. They immediately asked in a pleasant tone, young lady, were you captured? Tian Tian nodded blankly, feeling that her injuries were worthless. Lin Duo was following behind the two sneakily. She felt that she had done a good job of hiding. She even had the time to poke her head out to see if her sister was inside. It's Tian Tian. Oh. Lin Duo saw Tian Tian's figure. Before she could be happy, a hand suddenly covered her mouth and dragged her backward. She could only let out a whimper, but when she saw the face of the person behind her, she stopped struggling. Lin Ku's face was terrifyingly gloomy. He said coldly, "Come with me immediately. There are signs of moon slaves gathering here. It'll be too late if we don't leave now." He was about to drag Lin Duo away when the latter hurriedly broke free and pointed to the laboratory. But, Tian Tian is still in the laboratory. Not far from the laboratory in Star Moon Camp, Jiyu Jiaoyu was standing beside Ji Yunan. He was speechless as he looked at the glowing blue fruit in Ji Yunan's hand. With his knowledge, he could tell what Ji Yunan was doing at a glance. That was why he couldn't accept it. "Sir, once the camp is destroyed, it'll be difficult to rebuild it." Jiyu Jiaoyu tried to persuade him. It was the easiest to build a survivor's camp during the early stages of the apocalypse. However, it was almost impossible to do it again a month after the apocalypse. There were only so many humans in the imperial capital. Those who had not found a camp were either extraordinarily strong or dead. Ji Yunan's face was still expressionless. "There's no need." After the second side mission appeared, as Ji Yunan's understanding of Elder Baby deepened, so did his understanding of the entire instance dungeon. The king of moon slaves could evolve by eating moon slaves, but there was an upper limit. Elder Baby had been fed to a critical point and was only one step away from entering level 3. It was easy for Ji Yunan, who had the other 6 fruits, to figure out what the next step was. It seemed that Elder Baby's name was not wrong. The blue light was getting brighter. Ji Yunan had done this a few times, so he was familiar with the process. The movements coming from the laboratory were also faithfully reported to him by his shadow body. He was close enough that both sides were under his control. "Then, I'll leave this to you." Ji Yunan revealed a meaningful smile as his body gradually turned black. In the laboratory, Lin Ku braced himself and walked out. Just as he was about to speak, Gui Shu turned around and said with a faint smile, "Why? Don't you want that little friend to come out too?" Lin Ku was stunned. Lin Duo, who was behind her, had already poked her head out and even greeted, "Hello, uncle." Lin Ku's mouth twitched. She wanted to cover her sister's mouth, but Tian Tian saw her and screamed, "Lin Duo. It's Ji Yunan, it's all Ji Yunan's doing." Lin Duo was startled by her, and her face turned pale. She hadn't told anyone about Mr. Ji Yunan. Ji Yunan? Lin Ku suddenly turned around and stared at her sister. She had not forgotten about the king-level heroic spirit. Did Tian Tian mean that the central laboratory was Ji Yunan's doing? If that was the case. Her mind was filled with thoughts. Even Gui Shu said softly, "So that person is called Ji Yunan." "Wait, who is it?" As soon as Gui Shu finished speaking, a branch appeared out of thin air on his right and lashed out. A black shadow was pulled out and gradually turned into the figure of Ji Yunan. The latter looked at him with slight surprise. "Interesting, you are the first person in this world who can beat me out." "You are Ji Yunan?" Gui Shu pushed his glasses up again. There seemed to be some more wrinkles on his old face. "You are also the first person I cannot extract life force from. It seems that you do not know me." Behind Gui Shu, there seemed to be a scarlet tree standing up and continuously extracting life force from the surroundings. This old man's origin was very strange. Ji Yunan thought for a long time but had no impression of him. He asked curiously, "Do we have a grudge?" Gui Shu thought of his children who died tragically. When he heard that Jiang Shui and Jiang Tian died, how heartbroken he was. His eyes became colder and colder. "You can't remember? Then let me remind you." Gui Shu, who was wearing a red robe, put away his black-rimmed, gold-striped glasses and said expressionlessly. Chapter 144. The appearance of an old man with the surname Jiang caused the atmosphere in the laboratory to turn strange. Lin Duo could not believe that Mr. Ji Yunan would do such a thing. Lin Ku was shocked by the connection between Ji Yunan and his sister. Only eldest brother scratched his head, completely clueless as to what was going on. Ji Yunan still could not recall who this person was. When the two policemen, Jiang Tian and Jiang Shui, entered the laboratory, he did not know their names. Naturally, he could not guess the ghost tree's identity. However, this did not affect his actions. The shadow sword pierced into the ghost tree's heart in an instant. However, the ghost tree did not move, and a smile appeared on his aged face. Ji Yunan's sword seemed to have no effect on him at all. The shadow of the ancient tree behind him slowly solidified until it was completely solid, standing in front of everyone. This was a true third-rank heroic spiritualist, and was at the peak. According to the classification of the cosmic realm, he was at the same level as a Tao Lord. They had already broken through the boundary between the two types of heroic spiritualists. Their heroic spirits and bodies were always in a state of half-fusion, and they could fight alone or by themselves. One of the few Tao Lords in the Morning Star realm had actually appeared in front of Ji Yunan. The realm of a Tao Lord. Ji Yunan frowned slightly. His strength was only a portion of his body's, so it would not be easy to kill a Tao Lord. With a flip of his right hand, the long sword fell towards the ancient tree, stabbing at the same spot 15 times in a row. He pierced a big hole in the ancient tree, but before he could do anything else, the big hole quickly healed. It's useless. The ghost tree spoke expressionlessly, his eyes devoid of any emotion. I've extracted the life force of tens of thousands of people. How can you kill me? Ji Yunan only looked at him coldly. If the enemy was already in an invincible position and still continued to talk nonsense, there was only one possibility: he did not have the ability to kill the enemy, at least not yet. He was stalling for time. Ji Yunan saw this, and a faint smile appeared on his face. He stood on the spot without moving, but his body gradually turned black. Although with Ji Yunan's skills, he could always kill the monsters he wanted, there was a problem of cost-effectiveness. Killing the other party would take a lot of effort and time, and there were no benefits to be gained. On the other hand, not killing the other party would not cause any losses, so why kill the other party? Ji Yunan had never thought of himself as a bloodthirsty person. He simply wanted to complete a mission. Seeing this, the ghost tree's expression changed slightly. It could no longer maintain its confident expression. The ancient tree behind it suddenly opened all its branches, emitting a scarlet light. Everyone's hearts sank. It was as if something was slowly flowing out of their bodies towards the ancient tree. Ghost Tree's expression was still gloomy. He could clearly feel the life link from everyone except Ji Yunan. The blackening of Ji Yunan's body continued, and a red light began to glow beneath his feet. It was the Ghost Tree's heroic spirit domain. Unfortunately, before the red light could completely surround Ji Yunan, he had already turned into a black shadow and shattered, as if he was never there in the first place. Damn it! Seeing that his domain was only one step away from completion, but his opponent managed to escape, Ghost Tree could not help but curse. His heroic spirit domain could attack and defend at the same time, but it was not good enough for pursuit. What he was most afraid of was his opponent turning around and leaving without a fight. Therefore, he had been stalling for time with words from the beginning. He did not expect Ji Yunan to still escape. Jiyu Jiaoyu stood next to Ji Yunan's shadow body, watching the fruit glowing blue. Even he wanted to hide from the majestic aura. Is this the fruit of that tree? No wonder it can attract moon slaves. Jiyu Jiaoyu could feel the faint aura of moon slaves around him. Connecting it to the giant tree, he could roughly guess what was going on. 5 tall moon slaves with different expressions were sizing them up curiously, which made Jiyu Jiaoyu even more confused. He did not know what Ji Yunan was doing. In fact, he could not even understand Ji Yunan's actions all this while. There was no such thing as unconditional loyalty in this world. Jiyu Jiaoyu was an ambitious person, or rather, an ambitious heroic spirit. He was only passionate about power. When Ji Yunan was able to back him up and provide him with power, Ji Yunan would naturally be able to gain his loyalty. However, things were different now. Ji Yunan wanted to destroy everything he had. Jiyu Jiaoyu clenched his fists, hesitating. His rationality told him that even if he destroyed the fruit, Ji Yunan would not let him and his campsite go. However, was he going to just watch everything happen? Grandpa Jiyu, What are you doing here? A childish voice came from the side. Jiyu Zhaoyu turned his head in surprise. He saw a little girl about 5 or 6 years old standing next to the bushes. She was holding a little white dog in her arms. The little white dog looked at Jiyu Zhaoyu and even barked twice. Jiyu Zhaoyu looked at them blankly. He did not know this little girl, but he felt that she looked familiar. However, he knew very well that in the little girl's eyes, he might be the savior of the world. He raised his head, and his gaze toward the blue fruit gradually became determined. Master Ghost Tree, the moon slaves are gathering outside, and the source of power is not far away. Do you think it was done by that person? Demon approached Ghost Tree and said in a low voice. Ghost Tree's eyes lit up, and he blurted out, "It must be him. Several campsites have been destroyed by the moon slaves today. It was all the result of a large number of moon slaves gathering. It must be Jiyu Nan's doing." On the other side, Lin Duo and the others had just heard the news. Lin Duo asked in confusion, "Sister, what's going on with the gathering of moon slaves?" Lin Ku's face turned pale. Before she could speak, Moon Demon murmured, "It's the power of the guiding moon fruit. He actually used it here." As a witness of the trip to the Western City, Lin Duo also understood what Jiyu Nan had done after Moon Demon's explanation. The fear in her heart grew deeper and deeper. Mr. Jiyu Nan, how could he? She did not know how many times she had tried to communicate with Jiyu Nan with her heroic spirit contract, but her attempts were futile. "We have to stop him." Sun Demon rarely took the initiative to speak. If the power of the 7 guiding moon fruits is fused together, the true king of moon slaves will be born, and the disaster of moon slaves will be unstoppable. Lin Duo was not used to Xiaoming's long speech, but she understood the meaning behind his words. In the end, it was just one word: stop him. Ghost Tree and Demon's figures had already disappeared, and Lin Duo and the others hurried over. "Wait, I'll go too," Tian Tian said. Lin Duo and her sister had no reason to stop her, so they immediately nodded and agreed. But no one expected that a big guy would stand up at this time and grab Tian Tian with one hand. "Hey, what are you doing? Let me go, let her." Chapter 145. The moon slaves had started to invade the Star Moon camp. Jiyu Zhaoyu knew that he had no other choice but to save the people in the camp. Even if he destroyed the fruit now, he could not stop the waves of moon slaves. He could only choose to take it with him. Only by letting the source of attraction come from another place could the camp be spared from disaster. Jiyu Zhaoyu slowly approached the shadow in the center. He did not dare to take his eyes off Jiyu Nan. He had no choice but to be careful. After a while, Jiyu Zhaoyu finally went behind the shadow and found a chance to attack. He punched the shadow with all his might. The shadow did not even make a sound. It turned into a black shadow and disappeared. The fruit fell into Jiyu Zhaoyu's hand. The success was so smooth that Jiyu Zhaoyu almost thought it was Jiyu Nan's trap. However, the fruit in his hand was clearly emitting a strong wave of energy. "There's no time. Even if it's a trap, I have to step into it." Jiyu Zhaoyu clenched his teeth and flew out of the camp. However, a scarlet branch whipped over, directly smashing his plans to pieces. The ghost tree had arrived. The old man in a red robe slowly walked out from the night sky. The old tree behind him was still solid. The horrifying power it displayed made Jiyu Zhaoyu's heart cold. He looked at the fruit in Jiyu Zhaoyu's hand and asked coldly, "Where is Jiyu Nan?" Jiyu Zhaoyu listened to the other party's question and lowered his head to look at his hand. His heart was filled with bitterness. It was really too much of a coincidence. Now, no one would believe him when he said that he wasn't in cahoots with Jiyu Nan. However, Jiyu Zhaoyu was an old man who had lived for thousands of years. He reacted quickly. He did not hand the fruit over. Instead, he pointed in a direction and said, "He went that way. Sir, please follow me. I left a mark on him." "Oh." The ghost tree raised his eyebrows. His expression was still cold, but his voice seemed to be interested. Jiyu Zhaoyu's eyes flashed with a hint of pride. His words were obviously fake. However, the other party would not be able to tell immediately. As long as he led the way, his goal would be achieved. Right now, he only wanted to protect the camp. He didn't want his hard work to go to waste, and he didn't want the innocent survivors in the camp to die because of Ji Yunan's selfish desires. I'm still too soft-hearted in the end. Jiyu Jiaoyu felt rather helpless in his heart, but he did not regret it at all. If they really lived like Ji Yunan, where even the most basic humanity was obliterated, then what was the point of living? Oh! An "oh" similar to that of the ghost tree was heard, but it came from the other side that Jiyu Jiaoyu was pointing at. Ji Yunan was standing there with his arms crossed. Jiyu Jiaoyu's face turned pale. The next moment, Ji Yunan suddenly appeared in front of him and stabbed his abdomen. Shadow power began to surge out in a frenzy. Pitch-black color rapidly spread from the wound, covering most of Jiyu Jiaoyu's body in the blink of an eye. You don't even have the qualifications to be nourishment. This was Ji Yunan's evaluation of Jiyu Jiaoyu. He was a heroic spirit who couldn't even be converted into a moon slave, so what was the point of keeping him? Dong, 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 dong. Elder baby's heavy footsteps were heard. When Lin Duo and the others arrived, they saw Jiyu Jiaoyu being stabbed in the abdomen. Mr. Jiyu, Lin Duo immediately exclaimed, but her cry could not change anything. Jiyu Jiaoyu was torn into pieces in the blink of an eye. Jiyu Jiaoyu was a type of natural heroic spirit, a guardian of the magic box. In reality, he was purely a body of energy, and there was no such thing as a physical body. Therefore, he was very resistant to physical damage, but when faced with Ji Yunan's attacks on the level of rules, he seemed especially weak. The energy all over his body was eroded by the shadow power, turning into fragments that scattered all over the sky. The black fragments kept hitting her face. Lin Duo stared blankly ahead, and the emotions in her heart finally exploded. Mr. Ji Yunan, why are you doing this? Ji Yunan glanced at her coldly and slowly took a step forward. The Sun Demon Duo and the Moon Demon Duo immediately blocked in front of him. A strange smile appeared on Ji Yunan's face. These two twin heroic spirits that he had personally released were now blocking in front of him. Speaking of which, it was quite interesting. Of course, having done all kinds of strange missions, Ji Yunan was already immune to this kind of thing. These two little fellows were one of the side missions, so he would spare their lives, he could cripple them, but it was fine as long as they were not dead. Ji Yunan, you used the moon guiding fruit to create the king of moon slaves. If the moon slaves rule the continent one day, you'll be the culprit, the little lowly moon demon said coldly. Ji Yunan smiled but did not say anything. He only reached out to grab her head. The moon demon reacted very quickly, as if she was already prepared. Her figure suddenly blurred, and Ji Yunan returned empty-handed. Interesting. Ji Yunan smiled. These two little fellows were not very powerful, but their abilities were quite strange. The Sun Demon also walked forward and looked at him coldly. You've been betrayed by your friends and family. You'll die a horrible death. Ji Yunan did not say anything else. He calmly looked around. Lin Ku was confused, Lin Duo was confused and lost, the Sun Demon Duo and the Moon Demon Duo were indifferent, and Tian Tian was filled with deep-rooted hatred. Everyone's emotions appeared in his mind. Ji Yunan lightly shook his head. They might never understand that their opinions meant nothing to Ji Yunan. At the same time, a flash of red light suddenly appeared behind Ji Yunan. It was a branch that suddenly whipped down and hit Ji Yunan's back. The attack was silent and did not cause much damage to Ji Yunan, but it successfully attracted his attention. The ghost tree slowly walked over and smiled. The moon slave disaster has spread across the entire continent. I never thought that the Nighthawks would one day save the world. Ji Yunan also smiled. He let go of the moon guiding fruit in his hand and let it fall to the ground. Well then, save yourselves first. The red light under Ji Yunan's feet shone brightly. The ghost tree's realm of heroes had been completed. However, the moon slave's shouts could be heard behind him. The moon slaves were here. The ghost tree seemed to have understood something. He looked at Ji Yunan in disbelief. He pushed the power of his realm to the limit. The branches that were flying in the sky looked like a group of demons dancing. When the first moon slave appeared, Ji Yunan used a flash attack and disappeared from the ghost tree's realm. The realm could restrict the power of rules and could even break Ji Yunan's hidden shadow. However, the evil god's temple's skills could ignore it. No. The ghost tree let out an angry roar, but he could only watch as Ji Yunan's figure completely disappeared after a few leaps. More and more moon slaves gathered around them. The mountains and plains stretched as far as the eye could see. Other than Jiyu Jiaoyu, Ji Yunan did not kill anyone else this time because they could all be nourishment. Chapter 146. The moon slaves were wreaking havoc and blood was flowing everywhere. The Star Moon Camp, which was supposed to be the last pure land in the capital, did not manage to escape the disaster. The home that Jiyu Jiaoyu had built with her blood, sweat, and tears was destroyed by Ji Yunan so easily. The moon slaves had reached the vicinity of the guiding moon fruit. They could see the fruit and charged toward it like crazy. As usual, they tried to tear everything in front of them apart. However, this time was different. The scarlet ancient tree slowly opened up behind the ghost tree. Any moon slave that dared to approach him would be torn into pieces. The apocalypse was terrifying, but for a powerhouse like the ghost tree, no matter how many moon slaves there were, they would not be able to stop him unless he was determined to die. On the other hand, the king of moon slaves was a natural deterrent to normal moon slaves. No moon slave dared to approach them. The 6 kings of moon slaves, including eldest baby and 6th baby, stood there stupidly. Some of them had different expressions, but all of them were staring at the guiding moon fruit. Even eldest baby, who was the least intelligent among them, knew that the homologous power from the fruit was the source of his transformation. However, the others were not so lucky. The moon slaves that were charging at them from all directions posed a fatal threat to them even if they were not their targets. Devil was not powerful. As soon as he was surrounded by the moon slaves, he began to feel powerless. Master, save me. Master. He could only ask for help from the ghost tree. However, the ghost tree did not even look at him, let alone put him under its protection. Devil felt a chill in his heart. However, how could he fight back under such circumstances? His mind was in a mess. His hands began to move out of control. In the blink of an eye, he was torn apart by the moon slaves. On the other side, Lin Duo and the others were also panicking. Lin Ku was not much stronger than Devil. Moreover, she was a possession-type heroic spiritualist. Under such circumstances, she did not dare to step forward. Otherwise, she would be courting death. At the crucial moment, it was the twin heroic spirits of the sun and moon demons that protected their lives. The 2 little demons stood one in front and one at the back. On the ground, there was a pattern of intersecting sun and moon, isolating the moon slaves from the outside. The barrier that isolated the moon slaves seemed to be a protective barrier. From the outside, it looked like a thin film that could be easily broken. Fortunately, they were not the moon slaves' targets. Most of them chose to detour or climb over the wall after they ran into a wall. The moon slaves were so densely packed that it was hard to distinguish them with the naked eye. They almost covered the entire protective barrier. Lin Duo, Tian Tian, and Tian Tian stayed within the protective barrier, not daring to move at all. This was because even the last bit of moonlight had been covered by the bodies of the moon slaves. In the darkness, even time seemed to slow down. Lin Duo felt some sweat on her forehead. She wanted to raise her hand to wipe it off, but she couldn't. It was as if Mount Tai was pressing down on her, making it hard for her to breathe. The dark environment seemed to isolate her from the outside world. We have to think of a way. The sun demon's weak voice finally brought Lin Duo back to reality. We can't hold on for much longer, and, once the real moon slave king arrives, everything will be too late, the moon demon added. She sounded stronger than the sun demon. She wasn't as weak as the sun demon, but she sounded helpless. The last time we saw the moon guiding fruit, it would take at least half a month to ripen, but who knew, that person took it. When Sun Monster Xiao Ming said this, it sounded as if he was gnashing his teeth. They didn't know that Ji Yunan had flown over directly, but they were surprised that he could obtain the moon-guiding fruit from such a large number of sons of moon slaves. Lin Duo became even more silent. In her heart, Ji Yunan was the heroic spirit that she had summoned, so no matter what Ji Yunan did, she was responsible for it, even though she couldn't control him. Lin Ku was more concerned about the current situation. She spoke in the darkness. Is there any way to lure the moon slaves away, or should we try to move out? We can't move. Before the moon demon could finish her sentence, she suddenly felt some light above her head. The dim moonlight was like a lighthouse, illuminating the path in front of them. The moon slaves had dispersed. They had held on, but soon, a big face appeared above them, revealing a simple and honest smile. Only then did they realize that although the moon slaves had slowed down, it was far from the end. The one who had saved them was Eldest Baby. Eldest Baby scratched the back of his head, pointing at Tian Tian, and then at his shoulder. You want me to sit on it? Tian Tian was slightly startled, and asked doubtfully. Eldest Baby nodded, although she wasn't sure if he could understand Tian Tian's words. Tian Tian looked at her companions strangely, and she couldn't help but hesitate. According to the two heroic spirits, this was the king of Moonslave. Since it invited you, why don't you accept it? The moon demon was like a small adult. The king of Moonslaves would have a good impression of humans. Why didn't the ancestors prophesy about this? Of course, no one could answer her question. After a while, Eldest Baby carried Tian Tian on his back and started walking forward slowly, satisfied. Wherever Eldest Baby passed, no moon slave dared to approach. Lin Duo and the others had no choice but to follow him in order not to fall into the trap again. Time passed, and seventh baby's production was coming to an end. Although more moon slaves were gathering, the power of the guiding moon fruit had been divided into hundreds of portions. After this period of fighting, the moon slaves who had survived had far more power than ordinary moon slaves. Eye Devil's corpse was nowhere to be found, and Ghost Tree was still standing at the side, observing everything coldly. He was waiting. He was sure that Ji Yunan did not make such a big fuss just to watch a show. As long as he returned, he would still have a chance to take revenge. However, Ghost Tree was not in a good situation either. There were too many moon slaves. Although he was strong, there were too many of them, and the heroic spirits did not have any life force for him to absorb, so they were one of the most annoying enemies. The long battle had consumed most of his power, and he even suffered some injuries. Right at this moment, the last moon slave to emerge victorious was finally born. Roar. With a deafening roar, the king of moon slaves, who was usually called Seventh Baby, finally stabilized his power, and looked around coldly. Including Eldest Baby, the other 6 king of moon slaves slowly approached, as if some kind of power was guiding them. Chapter 147. Seeing Eldest Baby's action, the other 6 moon slave kings looked at each other and extended their palms one by one. 7 palms of different sizes stacked on top of each other. The faint moonlight grew brighter and brighter, even a little dazzling under the night sky. When the 7 of them stood together, the difference between them was obvious. Eldest Baby, who was born from 100,000 moon slaves, was not only the tallest, but also the strongest. Hence, he was obviously the leader. Second Baby, Third Baby, and Seventh Baby, who was born last, were in the second echelon. They were born from the 3 camps, and the rest were not worth mentioning. Tian Tian was already standing at the side, watching the scene nervously. She knew that Eldest Baby had reached a critical moment. It was unknown when Ji Yunan had reappeared. He stood at the side and looked over with interest. Could it be that the 7 of them have merged into one? Looks like the name was right. Ji Yunan stroked his chin. Looking at the situation, the name he had given out of bad taste might actually come true. When the moonlight reached a critical point, 6th Baby, who was the weakest among them, suddenly trembled and turned into a ball of white light. It began to disperse into the bodies of the other 6. The strength of the 6 rose abruptly. Eldest Baby, who was the strongest among them, even broke through the threshold of the 3rd grade and let out a deafening roar. Side quest completed, upgrade the Moon Slave Kings to the 3rd grade. The words came from the evil god's temple as promised, causing a smile to appear on Ji Yunan's face. According to the difficulty of this dungeon, this meant that he had earned at least 20 sin points. However, this was not a large quest, so the reward would be calculated after the quest was completed. Moreover, according to the pattern of the main quest, after this side quest was completed, the main quest's clue should also appear. However, there were no new NPCs here. Ji Yunan's gaze swept across Lin Duo and the others, and the smile on his face widened. The 7 Moon Slave Kings continued to merge. One by one, their companions were destroyed, causing the strength of the remaining to rise rapidly. In the end, even second baby and third baby were destroyed. Only eldest baby, who had expanded into a 20-meter-tall giant, and seventh baby, who was almost the same size as him, were left. Eldest baby opened his eyes in confusion and looked at the big guy beside him, as if wondering why he had not shattered into light. But at this moment, a strange, sinister smile suddenly appeared on seventh baby's originally stiff face. That was a smile that the kings of moon slaves, with their intelligence, should not have. Eldest baby did not even understand the meaning of that smile before he felt a sharp pain on his neck. Seventh baby suddenly opened his mouth and bit down on eldest baby's neck. Roar. Eldest baby roared in pain. He wanted to retract his hand, but seventh baby held it tightly. He couldn't move at all. He raised his hand to hit him, but seventh baby's movements were much more agile than his. His every move was like a master who had immersed himself in martial arts for hundreds of years. Eldest baby could not even touch a hair of his. After a few leaps, seventh baby bit down again. This time, even eldest baby's face was torn in half, revealing the crystalline blue meridians underneath. On the other side, Tian Tian screamed and hurriedly wanted to go forward, but she was grabbed by Ji Yunan. "Let me go! Let go!" Crack. The sound of bones crisscrossing could be heard. One of Tian Tian's arms was broken by Ji Yunan. He looked at the girl coldly. If not for the suspicion in his heart, her head would have been broken. Shadow power sealed Tian Tian's mouth, preventing her from screaming in pain. She could only struggle with all her might. Lin Duo seemed to be agitated by her good friend's tragic state. She suddenly took a step forward and said, "Mr. Ji Yunan, if you do this again, I'll send you back to the realm of martyrs." In the Morning Star Plane, people believed that martyrs only came from two places, the continent itself, or the boundless realm of martyrs outside the continent. Of course, there was no such thing as a realm of martyrs, but Lin Duo's threat to Ji Yunan was real. Ji Yunan glanced at her coldly and indifferently, and before he could speak, a voice had already resounded. "Ha ha ha ha. Martyrs, so you're a martyr." The ghost tree's figure had appeared behind Lin Duo at some point, his expression crazed. "If you kill her, you'll have to return to the realm of martyrs. You've made me wait." The red-robed old man was now like an arrow at the end of its flight. The moon slave had consumed too much of his strength, and his injuries were rather severe. However, at this moment, he felt that all the waiting had been worth it. Ji Yunan was actually a martyr. Yes, he was very good at running, and even his domain could not trap him. Taking revenge for his children had become an extravagant hope. But he was a martyr. Killing the martyr and sending him back to the realm of martyrs would make all his hard work go to waste. Was this not the best revenge? This was even more unbearable than killing him. Thoughts spun rapidly in his mind, but the ghost tree's hands did not stop moving. Countless branches fell towards Lin Duo in an instant. Lin Duo. Lin Ku was completely powerless to stop it. She could only watch helplessly as this scene unfolded. The sun and moon demons were already in front of Lin Duo, their faces filled with the determination to die. The purpose of their resurrection was to complete their ancestors' dying wish and resolve the calamity of the moon slave. Even if they died, they could not let their contractors die. However, at this moment, the shadow on Lin Duo's body suddenly began to boil. A black shadow stood up from the shadow, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into Ji Yunan's appearance. It was the shadow body that he had always kept by Lin Duo's side, and it came into effect at this moment. This time, the branch pierced into Ji Yunan's abdomen without any obstruction. "Mr. Ji Yunan." Lin Duo looked at this scene in a daze, and was momentarily speechless. The boundless vitality in Ji Yunan's body had already made the ghost tree so excited that he was about to faint. As long as he sucked this guy dry, it was not impossible for him to step into that legendary realm. However, Ji Yunan's face revealed a sinister smile, and the shadow sword suddenly appeared in his hand. This sword was very strange. Not only was its style different from usual, but it clearly looked like a large sword, and there was a faint white light on it. At the end of the day, the ghost tree was someone at the level of a Dao Lord. He faintly felt that something was wrong, but he could not see anything strange. However, a cold smile appeared on Ji Yunan's face. What kind of mentality was a boss that had been depleted to the point where he dared to come in front of someone like me who had the skill to kill? Judgment of justice. In the name of justice, deal true damage based on the amount of life lost to the target. Ji Yunan's expression became serious, and his entire body emitted the light of justice. The shadow sword in his hand also seemed to shine with a golden light. Of course, this was all an illusion. However, the effect of the skill would not be affected by the lack of a special effect. Have a taste of my great sword, Ji Yunan echoed in his mind. When the sword fell, it was as if the entire world was shaking. The golden light that descended from the sky instantly shattered the ghost tree. Ji Yunan was completely unaware of this. For him, this was just a special effect of the skill. Lin Duo and the others stared blankly. They were so shocked that they could not even speak. Only a strange but sinister voice sounded behind Ji Yunan. As expected of a master, you actually have such a secret skill. I wonder how many more times you can use it. Behind them, eldest baby had already disappeared. Only seventh baby, who had returned to his normal size, was left standing there with a cold expression. Chapter 148. It was Jiyu Zhaoyue's face. Ji Yunan turned around slowly. He seemed surprised, but he also seemed to have expected it. His eyes were calm. The wounds on his body were healing slowly, but not quickly. This was because Ji Yunan did not have the Dawn Sage robe. The Morning Star plane was not friendly to reincarnators. Due to the existence of reincarnation as a heroic spirit, reincarnators could not bring items with them. Therefore, very few reincarnators were willing to come here. Naturally, Ji Yunan could not bring any good equipment with him. He could only rely on his skills. Apart from his core skill, Shadow Power, Ji Yunan still had Passivation, Flash Strike, and Judgment of Justice. All three had extraordinary effects. However, Jiyu Zhaoyu was right about one thing. Judgment of Justice could not be used casually. Most of the players' skills in the Demon God game did not have cooldowns, but they were limited in other aspects. Passivation was a passive skill, Flash Strike consumed strength, and Judgment of Justice was a skills limitation. Judgment of Justice could only be used once on the same target. As an expert player, Ji Yunan had already memorized the characteristics of each skill. He looked at seventh baby, or rather, the real Jiyu Zhaoyu. Is it the fruit's power that preserved your last bit of consciousness? Ji Yunan looked at him and raised his eyebrows. Jiyu Zhaoyu was involved in the fusion with the King of Moonslaves, and had even taken over seventh baby's role. This was the only possibility. Jiyu Zhaoyue's body was still making strange noises, as if some power was gathering in his body. Perhaps. There was only coldness on his face. Have you ever thought that I would become like this, my lord? Ji Yunan sneered, and the only response he got was a sword strike without hesitation. The sword easily cut Jiyu Zhaoyu open, but the latter did not seem to hear it. His body recovered in the blink of an eye. The real King of Moonslaves has an almost indestructible body. Normal methods can't kill him, the Moon Demon shouted at Ji Yunan. No matter how many evil deeds Ji Yunan had committed in the past, the King of Moonslaves was now his greatest enemy. Ji Yunan rolled his eyes. Then tell me how to kill him. The coldness on Jiyu Zhaoyue's face deepened, but just as he was about to move, his expression began to twist again. Not only did the muscles on his face begin to move up and down, even his body began to twist in a strange manner. Ji Yunan took the opportunity to attack him a few more times, but it was clearly useless. After a short moment, Jiyu Zhaoyu raised her head once more. Her eyes were blood red, and she didn't possess the slightest bit of rationality. Roar. Just like before, he pounced over like a monster. His speed and strength were not inferior to Ji Yunan's. Therefore, Ji Yunan performed a displacement, and his figure instantly turned into a shadow body. He was smashed into pieces by Jiyu Zhaoyu, while his real body appeared 100 meters away. Jiyu Zhaoyu broke through the shadow body, but he didn't continue to cause trouble for Ji Yunan. He seemed to have gone mad, and kept roaring at the sky. Lin Duo and the other two's faces were pale. Only Lin Ku was still somewhat clear-headed. She whispered to the other two, Quick, let's go. She had long wanted to leave with her sister. If Lin Duo hadn't insisted on saving Tian Tian, they wouldn't have ended up in this situation. However, the moment she opened her mouth, the crazed Jiyu Jiaoyu suddenly turned her head, and her scarlet eyes shone on Lin Ku. Lin Ku, who had her back to him, felt a chill run down her back. She felt like she had fallen into an ice cellar, and she couldn't say a word. The next moment, under Lin Duo's horrified gaze, Jiyu Jiaoyu instantly appeared behind Lin Ku, grabbed her body from behind, and bit down. Even with his average build, he opened his mouth that was half the size of a face and bit off half of Lin Ku's head. 2/3 of Lin Ku's face was directly torn off, and there seemed to be some confusion in the remaining half of her eyeball. Sis. Lin Duo was completely dumbfounded. Her hands seemed to be trembling, or perhaps her entire body was trembling. Jiyu Jiaoyu had already completely lost his rationality. The bestial personality of Moonslave was currently in full control. He finished Lin Ku's corpse in a few mouthfuls, and let out an excited cry again. Then, he opened his mouth and pounced at Lin Duo. Lin Duo! A cry of surprise rang out. It was Tian Tian who suddenly rushed forward and pushed Lin Duo away. She shut her eyes tightly and stood in front of Jiyu Jiaoyu. The intense pain she imagined didn't come. She opened her eyes carefully, and saw Jiyu Jiaoyu right in front of her face. His eyes still emitted a scarlet glow, but his expression seemed to be a little puzzled. He was sniffing with his nose, as if Tian Tian was a delicious meal. Tian Tian instantly felt her hair stand on end, but before she could move, Jiyu Jiaoyu's expression changed again. This time, it was a familiar expression from Tian Tian. He raised his hand, touched his head, and smiled in a somewhat simple and honest manner. Even if he had changed his face, Tian Tian could still clearly recognize that this was Elder Baby. Is that you? Tian Tian asked in disbelief. She couldn't imagine that Elder Baby's hadn't disappeared after being torn apart and eaten. Elder Baby waved at her. The red glow in his eyes gradually disappeared, but a smile appeared on his face. Then, he pointed behind Tian Tian. Are you saying that we should hurry up and leave? After becoming the true queen of Moonslaves, Elder Baby's intelligence seemed to have increased a lot. He understood Tian Tian's words and nodded. Tian Tian was stunned for a while. Finally, she turned around and wanted to help Lin Duo up. Roar. Just as she turned around, Elder Baby's expression began to change again. The red glow in his eyes reappeared, and he bit down on Tian Tian's neck again. Tian Tian was so frightened that she didn't dare to move. When his fangs stopped right in front of her neck, all the hair on her body stood on end. She turned her head with difficulty, but saw that Elder Baby's face was sometimes ferocious, sometimes gentle, and sometimes simple and honest. Go! A simple word came out of his mouth, but before Tian Tian could say anything, another figure appeared beside them. It was Jiyu Nan. Jiyu Nan pressed down on Elder Baby's head, and his sharp fangs instantly sank into Tian Tian's body. Roar! Elder Baby roared angrily. Without even looking, Jiyu Nan threw a punch at Elder Baby's face, sending him flying. When he flew back, Tian Tian was already clutching her neck and falling to the ground. The Moonslave's infectious characteristics were madly corroding her body and soul. Elder Baby's personality finally gained the upper hand. He knelt on the ground with lifeless eyes and looked at Tian Tian. Chapter 149. Tian Yuan's definition of a son of Moonslave was a person who could still maintain his sanity after being contaminated by a Moonslave. However, Jiyu Nan had proven through hundreds of experiments that the contamination must occur after death, so there was only one possibility left. There were people who could regain consciousness after being contaminated. From the moment he saw Elder Baby, Jiyu Nan had already guessed even the most superficial intelligence was still intelligence. Since Elder Baby had intelligence, what about the people he contaminated? Unfortunately, in Jiyu Nan's previous experiments, Elder Baby seemed to have lost his ability to contaminate. It was not until the fusion with the King of Moonslaves was completed and Jiyu Jiaoyu displayed her extraordinary intelligence that Jiyu Nan's hope was rekindled. On the other hand, he had long suspected Tian Tian's existence. Professor Tian Yuan was a Moonslave, so Tian Tian could not be his biological daughter. Then why would he adopt a human daughter? Ji Nan did not believe that it was a nonsensical reason like hiding his identity. The most likely explanation was that Tian Tian was a very important person. Tian Yuan had discovered her a long time ago and did not want her to fall into the hands of others, so he adopted her himself. Tian Yuan had long suspected the existence of a son of Moon Slave. If Ji Nan knew about this, he would be even more certain of his judgment. When Ji Nan placed Tian Tian in the lab and intentionally allowed elder baby to interact with her, he was even more certain of his guess. Tian Tian's special constitution was probably just one of the simple things she could make the king of moon slaves feel close to her. Ji Nan stood where he was. All his previous guesses flashed through his mind in an instant. His eyes were cold as he waited for the development of the situation. Elder baby was hugging Tian Tian's body and did not speak. After a while, just when Ji Nan was starting to get impatient and wondered if the king of moon slaves had also lost his ability to contaminate, elder baby finally moved. A drop of blood was squeezed out from between his brows and gently dripped onto the wound on Tian Tian's neck. A strong heartbeat was heard. Tian Tian's face quickly became rosy, but elder baby's face became extremely pale. After a while, Tian Tian began to wake up. Her gaze was somewhat blank and bewildered, but it was obvious that she still retained her intelligence. Lin Duo finally regained some consciousness. She stared blankly at Tian Tian and asked in confusion, "Tian Tian, how do you feel?" Tian Tian turned her head and looked at Lin Duo. She then looked down at her hands and said, I don't know. You've accepted the origin of the king of moon slaves, so you're now a moon slave," Sun Monster Xiaoming suddenly said. "Ah, I became a moon slave." Tian Tian cried out in alarm. She had never expected that she would wake up and become a moon slave after falling asleep. "Don't worry." The moon demon sighed softly. "You possess the source of the moon slave king, so you can command the moon slaves on the mainland. So the root of the moon slave calamity lies in you." She then turned to look at Lin Duo. The ancestors said that the key to the moon slave calamity lies in the contractor. Is that what they meant? If it were not for the sake of saving Lin Duo, Tian Tian would not have run to the king of moon slaves, and nothing would have happened. Can I? Tian Tian was not confident. She turned to look at elder baby, but the latter only smiled weakly. "Of course," the moon demon said decisively. "As long as you can gather the moon slaves, or order them to stop attacking humans." Hey! Before she could finish her beautiful wish, a black long sword had already been thrust into Tian Tian's forehead without hesitation. The scene fell silent. Lin Duo was stunned, the sun monsters and moon demons were stunned, and elder baby stared blankly at Ji Nan. Tian Tian, who possessed the source of the moon slave, was humanity's last hope. Just like that, Ji Nan destroyed her life force. Main quest completed, kill the son of moon slave. Side quest completed, protect the twin heroic spirits Sun Monster and Moon Demon. Dungeon main quest completed. Main quest rating, A. Side quest development, B. Map exploration, B. Sin rating, A. Overall rating, A. Accumulated points, 1,200. Accumulated Sin rating, 115. The evil god's temple shook continuously, and a series of information flowed out. Everything was as Ji Nan had expected. Tian Tian, who was given the source by the Moon Slave King, was the true son of Moon Slave. It was at this time that Ji Nan finally understood the gameplay of this dungeon. In fact, he did not have to do so many things. All he had to do was watch from the start, and the son of Moon Slave would naturally appear. The first time Ji Nan had interfered with the main quest was when he killed Tian Yuan. If Tian Yuan had not died, there would not have been an apocalypse, and the chaos on the mainland would have been controllable. The guiding moon fruits would have appeared as usual, and the person who obtained them would have been Tian Yuan. After Tian Yuan cultivated the Moon Slave King, he would naturally find a way to extract the source. He had even prepared Tian Tian as a vessel, so how could he not do so? So, in fact, all Ji Nan needed to do was wait for the right time, and then kill Tian Tian. Of course, this way, his secondary development rate would be very low, and the sin rating would not be as high as 115. His total sin rating would reach 440 points. Whatever the case, this mission in the Morning Star plane could be considered to have come to a successful conclusion. However, it was different from what the world will had expected. If the world really had a will, it would have struck Ji Yunan with a bolt of lightning long ago. As this was not a dungeon produced by the evil god's temple, but an external mission, Ji Yunan could not return immediately. His body remained in the Morning Star plane. Well then, everyone, it's time for me to go. Ji Yunan was in a good mood, and bade farewell to Lin Duo and the rest. The sun and moon demons were speechless. The hope of saving the mainland had been destroyed in front of them, which meant that their mission could not be completed. This continent was destined to be plunged into misery and suffering. Humans would need at least decades to completely eradicate the moon slaves. Lin Duo, on the other hand, seemed to have matured after experiencing the death of her sister and the pain of losing her best friend. She stood up and said, "Little you said that her ancestor prophesied that the key to eliminating the disaster of the moon slaves lies with me. I understand now. If I had died here earlier, you would have disappeared long ago, am I right?" Lin Duo's face no longer showed any signs of immaturity, only indescribable sorrow. In her heart, it was because she had summoned Ji Yunan that she had caused the death of her sister and Tian Tian. She had even caused the world to fall into chaos and the arrival of the apocalypse. "So you want to kill yourself to expel me?" Ji Yunan asked with interest. "No." Lin Duo said angrily, "You've already achieved your goal. Don't tell me you want to leave so easily. I'll definitely live well, and let you." Ji Yunan's sword pierced into her chest. In the next moment, as Lin Duo's life force was severed, Ji Yunan's body began to fade away. Chapter 150. Planet Shenhuang, White Mist's headquarters. When Ji Yunan reappeared, it had been nearly half a month since he disappeared. He had not stayed in the Morning Star plane for long. It was only a short month, which was less than 3 days in the astral plane. However, after Ji Yunan returned, he had to spend more time recuperating. This time, Ji Yunan truly felt the damage that reincarnation did to his soul. The damage to his soul gave him a splitting headache, making it difficult for him to concentrate. Even eating sweets could not make up for it. No wonder there are very few solitary reincarnators after a certain level. Ji Yunan could not help but sigh. The essence of reincarnation was to leave the body and enter another plane to possess others. When the soul was strong enough, it was inevitable that it would cause damage to the soul. According to White Mist's information, the degree of damage depended on 2 factors: the amount of soul invested and the time spent in the reincarnation plane. The higher the proportion of soul used for reincarnation, and the longer the time spent in the reincarnation plane, the more severe the damage. After the soul recovers, I need to rest for a period of time before I can carry out the next reincarnation. Maybe I should try some small planes. Although the benefits are small, I need to invest less soul power. With the White Mist mirror, I don't lack missions. Ji Yunan adjusted his state and summarized the mission. Next, it was time to check his harvest. With Lan Sai digesting the god's stone, his sin value had reached 445 points, not far from the 500-point mark. However, points were still a problem. Ji Yunan now had 1,400 points, but to upgrade to grade 4 required 2,500 points. This meant that Ji Yunan had to continue clearing dungeons. The blasphemy divinity could only provide him with sin value. Without points, he could not upgrade. Ji Yunan slowly walked out of the hall. The star ring did not have any sunlight all year round, and there was only a grey night sky above his head. An unfamiliar girl was waiting outside the door, as if waiting for him to appear. As soon as she saw him, she bowed and said, "Lord Commander, the second commander asked you to see her after you come out." Ji Yunan looked at her face and confirmed that she was not Red Tail's clone. He nodded. In a quiet room, Ji Yunan saw that Red Tail was the same as before, but his face was more dignified. Originally, the Sand King and Red Tail had jointly managed the affairs of White Mist. Now that the Sand King had been replaced by Ji Yunan, the hands-off boss, the daily affairs naturally fell to Red Tail. And this was exactly what she wanted in this world. Some people were infatuated with power, and some people were obsessed with power. It seems that Master's trip was very smooth. Red Tail couldn't help but chuckle when he saw Ji Yunan. Previously, Ji Yunan had set aside a full month's time. Now that he had only spent half of that time, it was naturally smooth sailing. Ji Yunan had no intention of explaining too much. He asked bluntly, "What's the situation over here? 5 of the 6 great Tao masters are dead. The Providence experiment is completely in the hands of the divine oracle. Yi Chen, the so-called king of the northern region, is about to fight his way to the south. I wonder what the divine oracle wants to do." Red Tail said succinctly and then said, "But this is just a small matter. There is new news from the Alliance." The Alliance was naturally referring to the Blood Carrier Alliance. Red Tail used a strange tone and said, "His Highness, the Deep Sea King, seems to have returned." The Deep Sea King had once used Qin Xuanji to attack Ji Yunan from afar. He was a level 4 elite who wanted to steal the God's Stone. Big characters of this level usually did not stay in one place for long. Most of them were out doing their own things. The one who attacked Ji Yunan from afar was probably just a part of the power he had left in the central galaxy. And now, this big shot had returned. Why would he return at this critical juncture? Even a fool would know that the importance this person placed on the guardhood had far exceeded Ji Yunan's expectations. Ji Yunan could not help but frown. Why would a break-world elite of this world want a god's personality? He had no use for it. The god system was very exclusive. If he took the god's personality, he could only ignite the god fire or use it to desecrate it. There was no other use for it. Unless... Ji Yunan thought of a possibility, but he did not say anything. He just looked at Red Tail. "I thought you would sell me out as soon as you heard the news." Ji Yunan and Red Tail did not have much of a relationship. They were just working together. If the risk of working together was too great, there was no need to continue working together. Red Tail laughed and said, "This is the 6th galaxy. It is not like the 9th galaxy is a backwater place. Even a break-world elite cannot simply do whatever they want. Those 2 are not in planet Shenhuang, but they do not like people to secretly do what they want. His Highness, the Deep Sea King's reputation," she did not say much, but she revealed a lot of information. The 6th galaxy had a break-world elite. Of course, their bodies were not there. That was why the secret Pathmaster and the others could do whatever they wanted. However, it was one thing for one's own people to play, but outsiders could not interfere. Ji Yunan nodded. He was still thinking. Even though there was a tall person above him, he was not stupid enough to think he was safe. If the Deep Sea King's real body came, he could kill him and leave. When those 2 came back, they would only pay a price in other ways. He would not start a fight because of his reputation. The only good thing was that the Deep Sea King could not do anything to him. Let's wait a little longer. As Ji Yunan thought, his eyes looked cold. When I reach level 4, I will go to the Blood Servant Alliance and kill a bunch of them. Ji Yunan thought to himself. His mentality was like, I have been chased by the police for 3 streets. When I level up and become Superman, the police station will blow up. If he wanted to level up, he still needed points. So, he could not stop reincarnating. He also had to start working on the white mist. Leveling up from level 4 to level 5 was still a process of accumulating sin points and points. Ji Yunan needed a lot of world missions. How is the Shell Organization's plan going? Ji Yunan asked. The situation is not bad, but it will be more difficult in the future. Red Tail looked a bit helpless. The war between the North and the South has started. It is difficult for the organization to develop steadily. It's another son of luck. Ji Yunan's eyes revealed some interest. Lin Tian had given him a fog mirror. As the first child of luck to awaken, what about Yi Chen, the king of the North? His soul had recovered, but he still needed time to stabilize before he could reincarnate. It was good to take the net. As for whether the secret Pathmaster had a plan or not, what did that have to do with Ji Yunan? Tell me about the Shell Organization. Chapter 151. Ji Yunan sat alone in the Great Hall, holding a fog mirror in his hand. There was no longer any mist on the surface of the mirror, and there was even a small area emitting a faint light. This was the external feedback from the world's will, indicating that the mission had been completed. There was a large amount of detailed information in the white fog regarding reincarnation. After a period of research, Ji Yunan was no longer a beginner. Every plane had its own will, and these wills acted according to certain rules. When they discovered something that was not in harmony within the world, they would send requests to the outside world. These requests were captured through various methods and translated into missions, which were then completed through reincarnation. If one had the ability, they could directly break through the world. There were many ways to translate missions. For example, the white fog used luck, but there were also strange methods that relied on faith, resentment, or even living beings themselves. Once the world's request was completed, regardless of whether the translator completed it personally or not, the feedback would come to him. Ji Yunan placed his hand gently on the fog mirror, and an indescribable aura gradually appeared. Before Ji Yunan's eyes, everything he had done in the Morning Star plane was displayed bit by bit, all the way until Tian Tian became the child of Moonslave and was killed by him. The so-called world's will really doesn't have a consciousness. Ji Yunan silently ridiculed. If the plane's will was human, it would have long since chased him out after seeing everything he had done in the Morning Star plane. Would it even reward him? The aura of the plane spread along Ji Yunan's hand, reaching his brain in the blink of an eye and attempting to enter his soul. At this moment, the evil god's temple shook again, and a message was released. Importing external instance dungeon. Creating new personal instance dungeon, incomplete. Please name it. When Ji Yunan finished reading the message and realized what was going on, he almost blurted out, "What the F***ck?" He had countless thoughts running through his mind. It was actually a personal instance dungeon. Why would a personal instance dungeon appear at this time? What was a personal instance dungeon? Personal instance dungeon was a gaming term. If it was an old player who had immersed himself in the evil god game for many years, he would definitely tell you the answer with 2 words, Divine Kingdom. Throughout the Tier 5 phase, players needed to establish individual dungeons and turn them into physical existences. Of course, they could also do the opposite. They could find a dungeon and privatize it, turning it into a personal dungeon that players could control at will. Completing any of the above conditions would be considered as establishing a divine nation and stepping into the ranks of the Sixth Order. Previously, Ji Yunan had always been thinking about the immortal and demon world, and he had intended to use the latter method to turn it into his own personal instance dungeon. But now, the evil divine temple was telling him that there was already a private instance dungeon. Ji Yunan's current mood was like an account that had just opened up a skill tree. He had just clicked on the first 2 rows when the ultimate skill at the top appeared. Hey! I don't even have a prerequisite skill. How am I supposed to light it up? However, in the end, Ji Yunan was someone who had weathered through great storms and waves. He quickly calmed down, forget about stepping into the 6th grade, he wanted to turn the private instance dungeon into an actual existence. In the message, there was clearly the word incomplete. His consciousness quickly sank into the evil god's temple. On the virtual light board in front of him, there was already a personal dungeon column. There was only one lonely dungeon on it, waiting to be named. Name it Morning Star. In order to make it easier to remember, Ji Yunan directly gave the original realm's name. The dungeon's name quickly changed to Morning Star. At the same time, there was a word behind it, 30%. It's already 30% complete. Ji Yunan stroked his chin, but his mind was racing. There was only one way to create a private instance dungeon or privatize an instance dungeon in the game using the rules of one's own construction to replace the rules of the realm itself. When the players reached the 5th grade, all the instance dungeons would have a progress bar. The players would control the rules of the realm, and when the progress bar reached above 80%, they would attempt to make the instance dungeon private. But now, it seemed different. Ji Yunan had not even reached the 4th grade. He had not constructed the rules at all, so what progress bar was there to talk about? No, the essence of replacing the rules is actually to occupy the world's origin. Could it be that when the world's origin returned, it was directly swallowed by the evil god's temple? The more Ji Yunan thought about it, the more he felt that the possibility was high. Others comprehended the world's origin in order to perfect their own laws, but he had even eaten the origin. The easiest way to verify this is to translate some small world missions and let others complete them. I can't even open a 30% Morningstar instance dungeon. If it's a small world, it might even eat up the origin in one go. Ji Yunan's eyes shone with excitement. The use of a private instance dungeon was not only to establish a divine kingdom, but also to fill the gap in his points. Hey, why are you back again? Red Tail looked at Ji Yunan strangely. Didn't this person say he was going to find Lan Sai to help her deal with the King of the North? Did anyone complete the world mission I gave you last time? Ji Yunan asked impatiently. Not yet. Red Tail shook her head. Most of the people in our organization are good at making fog mirrors and collecting materials. Those who are good at completing missions are all treasures. How can they be found so easily? Translation was precious, but once one had it, it was an ordinary item. The difficulty of executing it was not high at all. On the contrary, people who knew how to complete missions were incomparably precious in any reincarnation organization. Most of them worked for large organizations. Seeing Ji Yunan's expression, Red Tail could not help but laugh. I've received a lot of feedback from the origin over the years, so the effects are much weaker. I've already given them priority to complete the mission you translated. Red Tail did not doubt Ji Yunan's eagerness. After all, she was very clear about how helpful the world's origin was to a Tao Lord. When she'd first received feedback from the origin, her performance had not been much better. Hence, she advised him again, many missions are unique and cannot be attempted multiple times. That's why the members are relatively cautious. From understanding the mission information to preparing the materials and choosing the time to enter, it all takes time. Red Tail had been a mission executor back then, and her results had been rather outstanding. She was very clear about this process. So, I advise you to get rid of Yi Chen first and then capture a child of Providence. That way, there will be more missions for you to choose from. However, Ji Yunan waved his hand. Call all the people in the organization who are responsible for carrying out missions. I'll teach them how to do it. Red Tail looked at him in shock. Ji Yunan looked back at her without hesitation and pointed at himself. Chapter 152. Chu Kang was an agent in the White Fog. He was a member in charge of completing world missions, just like Ji Yunan and the others had done in the Tower of Minglan. But today, Chu Kang was very annoyed. In the batch of missions issued by the organization half a month ago, there was a mission with a reward that he coveted. It was not difficult. He had been preparing for a long time and was about to start work, but he was asked to put down everything he was doing. What could a group of agents like them do? There must be other missions to do. The layman is guiding the expert. Chu Kang muttered unhappily, but he had to do as he was told. After all, the layman was the leader. When he arrived at the meeting place, Chu Kang was still full of impatience. He just wanted to finish up as soon as possible and go back to prepare for his mission. But when he was about to push the door open, an acquaintance rushed out from inside. Guan, you were called here too? Chu Kang said in surprise, as if he should not be here. The person in front of him was called Guan Sheng, also one of the agents in White Mist, but he was much more famous than Chu Kang. He was an ace agent. If not for their personal relationship, Chu Kang would not even be able to talk to him. But now, Guan Sheng looked like he was in a hurry. He just smiled and greeted Chu Kang, and the words "I have something to do, so I'll leave first" were written on his face. Chu Kang was used to this. Guan Sheng was usually a mission maniac and was not interested in anything else. Now that he was called over for no reason, it was most likely that he was impatient and wanted to leave. But he did not expect that when Guan Sheng left, he would see him empty-handed. He hesitated for a moment and said, "You usually receive difficult missions, right? It's best to bring the information here." "Oh, right, only the batch from half a month ago." After saying this, Guan Sheng left in a hurry, leaving Chu Kang baffled. Could it be that if he brought the mission information, he could solve it here? Chu Kang shook his head and pushed the door open, but what he saw was quite a bizarre scene. A young man in a white robe was sitting in the main seat, talking incessantly and writing something on the wooden board behind him from time to time. When Chu Kang came in, he was writing on a piece of wood and changing it into a new one, but the new one was respectfully received by someone next to him. When Chu Kang saw the faces of the people around him, his eyes almost popped out. That was the head of their missions department, old Mr. Zhuo Chuanyuan. Old Mr. Zhuo was one of the elders of White Mist and a blood descendant from the Central Starfield. Not only was he powerful, but he was also an absolute authority when it came to executing missions. If it wasn't for the fact that there weren't many reincarnation organizations for bloodkin, Elders would have been condescending by staying in the White Mist. But it was this old man who took the wooden board full of words and looked left and right as if he was afraid that it would be snatched away. Elders were. Chu Kang quickly stepped forward to greet him. Everyone present was from the task division. Naturally, they had to greet their boss first. Elders were only nodded when he saw him. You're here. Take a seat first. Listen carefully and learn well. After saying this, he went back to studying the plank. Chu Kang was startled, and when he saw that the people around him also had similar expressions, he could only sit down patiently. After Chu Kang sat down, he heard the white-robed young man on the main seat say, "Next. White Bird City State, whose mission is this?" As soon as he finished speaking, the door was pushed open with a bang, and the person who came said, "Mine. Sir, that's my mission." Chu Kang looked over there, dumbfounded. Guan Sheng had already rushed back, and his forehead was still sweating. As Guan Sheng spoke, he quickly handed the information in his hand to the white-robed young man, as if he was very glad that he had made it in time. Chu Kang had some understanding of the mission of White Bird City State. The mission was located in a small plain, but there was a powerhouse at the Eternal Domain realm. The target was to kill the son of a member of parliament in White Bird City State. The investigator sent by the organization reported that the member of parliament was very protective of his son. The target's specific identity couldn't be determined. They only knew the school he studied at and some other basic information. According to the investigator's investigation, there were currently as many as 21 suspected targets. In order to ensure that the mission wouldn't be triggered, the investigator didn't dare to investigate further and could only report back. Plan: ask the agent to secretly investigate the background of the suspected target. You can also start from the Member of Parliament himself. If there is any information about his identity, please contact the headquarters at any time. After the white-robed young man finished reading the information, he read the plan given by the missions department again. In the absence of specific information, the missions department could only choose to deal with it this way. This plan was personally reviewed by Chu Kang, and he felt that he didn't make any mistakes. However, the young man's next words almost made him fly into a rage. Who made this plan? What's the use of investigating the Member of Parliament? Can't they just go to the target's door and kill him? The young man casually threw the file on the table and said disdainfully. Chu Kang glared. He really wanted to stand up and question the other party. Do you understand? Did you read the information carefully? As long as something happened to one of the 21 suspected targets, the target would definitely be strictly protected. Moreover, even if you were lucky enough to find the target, who dared to say that the target was unprotected? Most world missions had a time limit. After all, the plane of reincarnation was a real world, and it was also moving along a fixed path. If a suitable entry point was not found, it was very likely that the mission would directly fail. Chu Kang already had a sneer on his face. This was obviously an outsider. Based on his many years of experience in carrying out missions, it was obvious that the Member of Parliament was the key. If they found enough clues on him to confirm the target's true identity, they would be able to kill him in one strike. And in the process, they might also encounter false information. It would depend on whether the agent had the ability to distinguish between them. However, this wasn't his mission, so Chu Kang could only suppress his anger. Others might not say anything, but he believed that Guan Sheng definitely wouldn't. As expected, Guan Sheng stood up. However, his attitude was so polite that Chu Kang thought he had recognized the wrong person. There are 21 suspected targets. How do we confirm which one is the target? Guan Sheng bowed slightly, like a primary school student asking a teacher. The young man said matter-of-factly, "There's no need to confirm. Can't we just kill them all?" Take a closer look at the information of these 21 people. 16 are students of the same high school, 4 are teachers of this high school, and only 1 is unemployed. When you reincarnate, bring enough high explosives with you. Find that homeless person first, bring him to the high school, and then place the explosives on him to detonate. The young man knocked on the table and returned the file to Guan Sheng. It doesn't matter how many people protect the target, as long as there are enough explosives. Chapter 153. When Chu Kang came out of the conference room, he was still in a daze. It's already night time. He looked up at the sky, his mind still not clear. He then said to himself, "Oh, there's no day in the celestial ring." Chu Kang could not be blamed. Anyone who had experienced a whole day of mental torture would feel the same way. It was like a champion of the Olympiad who listened to an internationally renowned master's lecture for a whole day. He was completely defeated in the field he was most proud of. "Guan Sheng, are we dreaming?" Chu Kang patted Guan Sheng's shoulder. "Why do I feel like the mission has suddenly become easier?" Guan Sheng's situation was better than his. At least he was still conscious. He sighed and said, "I don't know who that person is, and whether he will come again in the future. Forget it, let's finish these missions first." Guan Sheng, the mission maniac, took a book of missions and left excitedly. Chu Kang looked down at the small book in his hand. It was also filled with how to deal with the missions. When he thought of that ridiculously young face, his heart was still full of disbelief. When Ji Yunan returned to the hall, he really felt a little tired. Even though those missions didn't seem difficult to him, finishing so many missions in a day would still make him feel mentally and physically exhausted. But if his guess was correct, then the price he had to pay would be worth it. Small planes often had a faster time flow, so the time needed to complete the missions was not long in the astral world. Ji Yunan took out the fog mirror again. There were already many light dots on it. Those were the small missions that had been completed. Importing external dungeon. Creating a new personal dungeon, incomplete, please name it. Importing external dungeon. Creating a new personal dungeon, incomplete, please name it. Importing external dungeon. Creating a new personal dungeon, completed, please name it. Importing external dungeon. After importing the world's origin, a series of prompts appeared in the evil god's temple. This time, there were more than 10 missions, but in the end, only 1 succeeded in creating a personal dungeon. 1 was enough. Ji Yunan was slightly happy. He quickly opened the dungeon interface to see if the private dungeon mentioned here was the same as what he remembered. In the instance dungeon interface, among the row of incomplete instance dungeons that were still gray in color, the word completed was particularly eye-catching. Private instance dungeon, unnamed, established instance dungeon, initial members, 4, instance dungeon reset period, 3 days. In the game in his previous life, private instance dungeons were a very interesting way to play. The interaction between different players was basically completed through this way. Private dungeons could be divided into 2 types, autonomous and established, according to the difference between players who built them on their own initiative and those who took them from outside. Independent dungeons were used by players to level up. If players wished to reach Tier 6 and complete their first-class promotion, relying on independent dungeons was the best method. Although an established instance dungeon could also be turned into a private one, its greatest use was not for that. Instead, it was for grinding points. Of course, instance dungeons were meant to be farmed over and over again. Private instance dungeons could not earn any sin points, but they could earn a certain amount of sin points. Once a dungeon was opened, players could choose to enter the dungeon and complete the quest together with their NPC companions. They could also bring other online players with them. Of course, there were no online players in this world. If Ji Yunan opened the dungeon, how would he choose his companions? In the original game, in order to increase the randomness, NPC companions were randomly selected from all over the world. It could be a dungeon character that players were familiar with, or it could be a completely fictional character. Ji Yunan did not have time to think too much about it. He would know once he opened the dungeon. However, at this moment, The main door of the hall was suddenly pushed open, and Red Tail rushed in. Ji Yunan's consciousness quickly withdrew from the evil god's temple. He slowly opened his eyes on the throne and looked at Red Tail with a somewhat unfriendly gaze. Red Tail noticed this and said without hesitation, "My lord, Lan Sai is seriously injured, Shenhuang continent, Tang family." Tang Xian stood anxiously outside the door, waiting for the situation inside the house. "My lady, you have been wandering around here for 20 times. Can you stop for a while?" Beside her, a young man in black said. His tone revealed a sense of leisure, in sharp contrast to Tang Xian's anxiety. "What do you know?" Tang Xian glared at him fiercely. "If something really goes wrong, you'd better prepare for your funeral." "Oh, it's not that scary." The young man pretended to be afraid, obviously not taking it seriously. After a pause, seeing that Tang Xian did not speak, he continued, "It was that woman named Lan Sai who came here on her own. We didn't invite her here. How can you blame us? No matter how powerful the people behind her are, they have to be reasonable, right? This time, we are helping the Merchant Alliance." The young man spoke indifferently, and his heart was filled with disdain. His name was Tang Zichuan, and he was the leader of the younger generation of the Tang family. He had traveled with the family's caravan to several starfields. Whether it was his vision or strength, he was far above ordinary people. Unlike Tang Xian, who grew up freely, Tang Zichuan not only broke through the transcendent realm early, but also had many adventures. He was a descendant of the Tang family. He had just returned to the Shenhuang planet and had not experienced the farce of the Tang family before, so he did not take this matter to heart. In his opinion, this was really not a big deal. It was too common for several parties to compete for resources, and when it came to fighting, others would not stop just because of your background. This woman named Lan Sai, wasn't she just the leader of a small organization that had just been established and wanted to follow behind the family to get some soup? Why did she have to hang on to the name of cooperation? She didn't even see if they had the qualifications. When she first came on the stage, she seemed to have some skills, but it didn't take long for her to be exposed. It turned out that she was a rookie with no combat experience. Tang Zichuan, who had been on the battlefield for a long time, despised this kind of greenhouse flower the most. Naturally, he would not be polite with his words. After a few casual words, Lan Sai really took the bait, and as a result, she was seriously injured in the chaotic battle. The two were still talking when the door opened. A doctor came out and shook his head gently at Tang Xian. "We did our best. Whether she can wake up or not, it's up to God's will." Depending on God's will meant that there was no hope for her. Tang Xian was stunned. Just as she was about to speak, someone else came to report, "Eldest miss, 2 people have come to visit, saying they are your friends." Chapter 154. Ji Yunan stood in the Tang family's main hall, feeling a little strange. The matter of Lan Sai being seriously injured was indeed beyond his expectations. Or rather, he had never thought that there would be an NPC who would court death to the point of seeking it himself. But thinking about it carefully, Lan Sai was indeed such a person. During the battle in 66 Amaterasu, if it wasn't for her brother, she might have died at the hands of Qin Xuanji. Ji Yunan laughed and shook his head. Fortunately, she had the God's Stone. As a carrier of the God's Stone, she couldn't even commit suicide, let alone be beaten to death. Being seriously injured this time might be beneficial. "Where is she?" Ji Yunan asked casually. Tang Xian, who was standing in front of him, smiled bitterly. She knew what Ji Yunan had done in the Tang family. Now that something had happened to Lan Sai, it was hard to say what Ji Yunan would do. "She's not in good condition," the doctor said. "It's okay, she won't die," Ji Yunan said with a wave of his hand. Tang Zichuan, who was following behind Tang Xian, sneered when he saw Ji Yunan's confident look, but he didn't say anything. A moment later, Ji Yunan stood in front of Lan Sai's bed. She was lying there with a pale face, and even her breathing was very weak. "The God's Stone hasn't been triggered. It's because the injury isn't serious enough." Ji Yunan only needed one glance to know the reason why Lan Sai was unconscious. Her brain was injured so badly that she couldn't wake up, but the injury itself wasn't serious, so the divine spark didn't actively protect her. In the words of the game, Lan Sai had suffered a crowd control, but his HP hadn't dropped much. But in reality, even if it wasn't a serious injury, once it hit a vital part, it would be enough to cause serious consequences. Tang Xian looked at his silent expression and couldn't help but say, "She's just unconscious, why don't?" "It's okay," Ji Yunan said softly, and then a small black sword appeared in his hand. Poochie. The small sword entered Lan Sai's heart, and blood spurted out. Tang Xian, Tang Zichuan, and Red Tail, who came with him, were dumbfounded. Even if he expected Ji Yunan to be able to cure Lan Sai's red tail, he did not expect it to be such a method. The next moment, a golden light shone from between Lan Sai's eyebrows, and an indescribably noble aura flashed past. The wounds on her body had already healed. "She'll wake up in a while." Ji Yunan looked at Red Tail. "How is she?" "There are traces of the power of Providence," Red Tail said with a sullen face. Ever since Ji Yunan heard about Lan Sai's situation in the main hall, he had first understood the situation. It was easy to explain. Lan Sai was ordered to establish the shell organization Blue Water Lake. She, who had never had the experience of being a leader, could only seek help from Red Tail and the others while cooperating with others to develop the organization. She had no foundation on the mysterious yellow star, so naturally, she was in the dark. In the end, she could only find the Tang family, at least she knew them. The Tang family knew that Ji Yunan was behind Lan Sai, so they were very willing to help, but the result of the cooperation was not very good. But what made Ji Yunan feel the most strange about this whole incident was the person who had injured Lan Sai. This person was called Yi Long, born in the northern region. He was the younger brother of Yi Chen, the king of the northern region, and also one of the famous sons of Providence on the continent. A son of Providence like him would not easily connect with other experts. Once there was a connection, it must be the guidance of the power of Providence. As the original user of the power of Providence, the White Mist organization was well aware of this. For example, the grudge between Ji Yunan and Lin Tian was caused by Fu Jing, so the power of Providence naturally affected Ji Yunan. No other lines of Providence were found. Providence descended directly on her. "It was the divine design who took action," Red Tail said expressionlessly. "Good." Ji Yunan sneered. He did not kill the divine design sect master directly, but he did not expect that he would dare to come out again. After a pause, Ji Yunan said, "You can put away the net of the mysterious yellow star and start hunting the sons of Providence. That Yi Chen, can you deal with him?" "No problem, this is what we are good at." Red Tail smiled lightly. The divine design sect, the White Mist's translation method, was completed by collecting Providence. Naturally, they had studied many ways to deal with the sons of Providence, unlike the 6 Tao masters who were half-baked. They only learned to set up the net, but they did not learn how to close it, so they ended up being unable to control it. The two of them talked as if there was no one else around, as if Tang Xian and Tang Zichuan next to them did not exist. Tang Xian had long been used to Ji Yunan's bad character, but Tang Zichuan's eyes were slightly gloomy, and he said in a deep voice, "Are you talking about the king of the northern region, Yi Chen? Just yesterday, another 3 Tao lords perished at his hand. Ever since Yi Chen had become a Tao master, he had spent decades recuperating and building up the northern region like an iron bucket. Now, he was finally on the path of expansion. His move was like a thunderbolt. In an extremely short period of time, the northern region army attacked cities and occupied territories everywhere. Lan Saihui was injured by Yi Long because she was fighting for a resource. In response to Tang Zichuan's words, Red Tail only glanced at him indifferently, then smiled and said nothing. Ji Yunan completely ignored him. "I'll leave this to you. When she wakes up, ask her to go back to the organization and cultivate. I'll go talk to the Divine Design sect." After leaving such a sentence, Ji Yunan's figure instantly disappeared. Ever since he had the private dungeon, Ji Yunan was actually not very willing to waste time on the mysterious yellow star. He had always done things for points and sin points. At most, he would temporarily gain the attention of a 4th-grade powerhouse, so he needed to be a little more careful. Reincarnation was in a cooldown state. Lan Saihui was constantly providing sin points while he relied on the private dungeon for points. Knowing that the Deep Sea King had returned, coupled with this incident, Ji Nan decided to let Lan Saihui hide first. Even the Divine Design sect had noticed Lan Saihui, who dared to say that the Deep Sea King would not. If Lan Saihui was captured by the Deep Sea King before he rose to 4th grade, it would be a great loss. With that thought in mind, Ji Nan had already arrived in front of the Divine Design dojo. This time, he did not use Starship but directly came up with his own strength. Therefore, as soon as he arrived at the door, someone immediately came to stop him. "Who are you? If you wish to enter the Divine Design dojo, please state your name." The black light of the shadow sword flashed and the bodies of several guards were cut in half. However, Ji Nan's gaze did not even change. He controlled the white mist, so naturally, he knew that the arrangement of providence needed the support of a force. It would be very troublesome to control it alone. Therefore, even if he could not kill the Divine Design this time, he had to annihilate the dojo. Only the Divine Design was left alone, so naturally, there was no way he could interfere with the providence. Ji Nan walked slowly into the dojo. When he passed by their corpses, he even made a not very funny joke. Chapter 155. Blood dyed the star ring, and corpses littered the ground. Ji Nan was alone with his sword, but that wasn't quite right. In reality, there were dozens of shadow bodies moving at the same time, wantonly slaughtering all the living people they could see. Whether it was the disciples of the Tianji dojo or the cultivators who came to inquire about the Tianji, none of them could escape death. Even if the latter group of people were actually innocent, what did it matter? Ji Nan didn't have the time to distinguish who deserved to die and who was innocent. He would only use the most efficient method to deal with things. As for things like morality, it didn't apply to players. "Who exactly are you? What grudge does my Tianji dojo have with you?" A person who looked like a manager struggled to get up after being struck by the sword. "Where is the Tianji dojo?" Ji Nan asked expressionlessly. The manager revealed a cold smile. "The dojo master has calculated everything in the world. How could he be found by you?" Ji Nan nodded, expressing his agreement with the manager's words. Then, he chopped off the manager's head. Ji Nan wasn't a Chinibya who advocated the whole world should listen to me. Others naturally had the right to not listen to him, but he also had the right to kill all those who didn't listen. The Tianji dojo master was able to escape because of his ability. It didn't stop Ji Nan from slaughtering his dojo. The monk could run, but the temple couldn't. The shadow body's slaughter continued. Occasionally, there would be a fish that escaped the net, but Ji Nan didn't care. He slowly walked into the Tianji dojo master's study. Most of the books here had already been taken away. It seemed like the Tianji dojo master had expected this. This was also normal. Anyone who understood Ji Nan wouldn't be stupid enough to wait for death at home after making a move against Lan Sai. He ran away on his own, leaving behind his disciples in the dojo to deceive others. How heartless. Ji Nan sighed at the Tianji dojo master's decisiveness. He didn't think that he was the one who acted as the executioner. The process of wiping out the heavenly secret dojo was nothing to write home about. There was not even the slightest bit of resistance, and the heavenly secret dojo lord had long since retreated. Did he spend so much effort to break through to the 4th rank? When Ji Nan was free, he would think about the purpose of the heavenly secret Dao Lord. This was most likely the reason. He didn't even want his dojo. What else could it be for? However, none of this had anything to do with Ji Nan. After locking Lan Sai in a small black room and letting her cultivate properly, Ji Nan left the white fog and hid in a small city on the mainland, where he disguised himself as an ordinary scholar. The Deep Sea King had already returned to the astral world and could come looking for him at any time. After all, he was a Tier 4 existence, so he had to show some respect. The relationship between Ji Nan and the white mist could not be hidden from those who were observant. Staying in the white mist was tantamount to courting death. Private Instance Dungeon. After dealing with the aftermath, Ji Nan could finally calm down and study his private instance dungeon. Out of the dozen or so private instance dungeons that he had developed in one go, only one had reached 100% progress and was displayed as completed. And this instance dungeon corresponded to a small plane called Splendid World. Splendid World was not a small plane. There was only one planet in the plane, and the local civilization was half technology and half special ability development. Even in the modern city that was like a steel forest, there were all kinds of special ability users, and they were the kind that were open to the public. Name it Splendid World, and open the private instance dungeon. Ji Nan ordered the interface. Immediately after, he found that his consciousness had returned to his body, and then his spirit began to be pulled out by itself. This process was very similar to the situation when he was reincarnated. However, this time, his spirit did not go outside the plane, but to a strange space. A small ball of light separated from his spirit, and he could clearly see that it was the ball of light that represented Splendid World. And after his spirit released the ball of light, it turned into a small dot of light, and slowly approached the ball of light. And what surprised Ji Nan even more was that in this strange space, there were countless balls of light and dots of light. As soon as Splendid World's ball of light appeared, it immediately attracted many dots of light. Around the ball of light, there were clearly 4 gaps for the dots of light to enter. Apart from the one that Ji Nan had firmly occupied, the other 3 had caused a scramble. Ji Nan looked at this scene in astonishment. This was something he had never seen in the game before. No, it should be said that he had seen a similar scene before. It was the scene of a tycoon player building a map, and other casual players fighting to enter the instance dungeon. Could it be? The next moment, Ji Nan's consciousness appeared in an office in a building, and in front of him sat 3 people with faces full of joy. A woman, an old man, and a little boy. The woman was dressed like a beautiful urban woman, and there was thick eyeshadow on her face, but she did not give off a vulgar feeling, and instead looked extremely charming. The old man's attire was slightly retro. He wore a pair of gold-rimmed glasses on his face, and he wore a double-breasted black suit, looking like an old scientist in a portrait. The little boy was a little boy, but his attire was the strangest one. He wore half a lady's sun hat on his head. The reason why it was half a hat was because the sun hat had been cut vertically in half, leaving only the left half, and the little boy was actually wearing it just like that. Looking at the 3 people with different appearances, Ji Nan coughed lightly and said, "How should I address the 3 of you?" The woman revealed a smile. "You can call me Purple Will, sir." The little boy also smiled. His smile was very strange, and the smiles on the left and right sides of his face were very uncoordinated, as if there were 2 people smiling. "Zwazwa, that's what everyone calls me." The old man seemed to be the most familiar, and his attitude was also the lowest as he said, "I'm Chio Wenran, and I just became a Star Lord 4,000 years ago. I dare not be mentioned in the same breath as the 2 seniors." Hearing this, Ji Nan couldn't help but raise his eyebrows, but he didn't reveal any other strange expression. He calmly said, "I'm Ji Nan." Purple Will and Zwazwa seemed to be rather famous people, and since the old man Chio Wenran had acknowledged himself as a junior, the task of communicating with Ji Nan naturally fell to him. "Sir Ji Nan, you're the master of this small world, right? I didn't know this place was." Chio Wenran spoke halfway, and then waved his hand. "Please don't misunderstand, sir. I was just asking casually." Ji Nan waved his hand, and then said, "This is the Splendid World." Chio Wenran and Zwazwa didn't react, but Purple Will said, "It's the Splendid World. I came here more than 600 years ago, and thought it wasn't bad back then. I didn't expect it to be taken away in the blink of an eye. The Splendid World is not bad," Zwazwa also said. Zwazwa also said at this moment. When he spoke, his 2 faces still had completely different expressions. Other than the cultivation limit being a little too low, leaving only the extraordinary level, everything else is not bad. Ji Nan watched the 3 of them communicate, and after some thought, he said, "Speaking of which, the 3 of you. So what's the situation now?" Hearing this, the 3 of them couldn't help but be stunned. In the end, it was Chio Wenran who said with a smile, "Sir, you must be someone who has immersed yourself in cultivation and already has the ability to take away a world. Could it be that this is your first time entering the All-Heavens Star Path?" Ji Nan nodded, but didn't say anything. Chapter 156. Ji Nan was actually very familiar with the private instance dungeon. The Evil God game was a single-player game that allowed players to play online, and the private instance dungeon was the basis for players to play online. From grade 5 onwards, players began to have private instance dungeons. Players could use their own rules to modify the instance dungeon, and then put the modified products on the public platform for other players to conquer. Before this kind of instance dungeon was released, the player himself had to pass it once, and after the release, the player himself would not be able to obtain any rewards. The other was the random instance dungeon, in which the player took out the instance dungeon and handed it to the system for random modification. Even the player himself did not know what the modification would be. And what Ji Yunan was facing now seemed to correspond to the random instance dungeon in the game. Ji Yunan and the other three stood on the roof of the building, and there was a blood-red countdown in the air. There were only 30 seconds left. You're saying that the heavenly star path will follow what I know and hear, and create missions for the sub-astral world? Ji Yunan asked with a strange expression. That's right. Qiu Wenran nodded. Ji Yunan turned his head and looked at the countdown, but his expression became more and more strange. After a simple conversation with Qiu Wenran and the other two, Ji Yunan received too much information, to the point that he could not fully process it. These three people were indeed astral lords, and they were real astral lords at grade 5 or even higher. According to Qiu Wenran, he had only become an astral lord for just 4,000 years, and had not had the time to choose an astral world. Purple Will and Zwazwa were both veteran experts of the star path, and they were real big shots. Astral lords correspond to grade 5, and at grade 5, one has to find an instance dungeon to build a divine kingdom. This process is exactly the same as in the game. Ji Yunan touched his chin and thought to himself. Under normal circumstances, he should have reached grade 5 and had a private instance dungeon before he could enter this place, but devouring the world source brought this step forward. Because of this, when he was still at the 3rd rank, he would have to face off against those at the 5th rank or even higher. Fortunately, according to Qiu Wenran, it was only a strand of consciousness that entered the star path, not even a soul, so astral lords could not really hurt the other party. Even if he killed his opponent, his body would be reconstructed by the laws in the blink of an eye, leaving him completely unharmed. Even the system of unlimited attempts in the dungeon has been retained. It really is similar. Ji Yunan sighed softly. The countdown in the air was about to end. The heavenly star path replaced the game system, and the Star Lord replaced the other players. Only Ji Yunan was himself. If it was really built according to what I know. Ji Yunan spoke at the last second. Please be mentally prepared, the three of you. This picture might be a little poisonous. The next moment, the countdown ended, and the blood curtain suddenly descended. The entire sky turned blood-red, and the originally noisy city suddenly fell silent. A line of words was written in the sky in blood. The first stage was to arrive at the destination. Victory condition: all 4 players must survive before the countdown ends. Power limit: 2nd order. Before Ji Yunan could sigh at the familiar words, an inexplicable power descended, and the strength of Ji Yunan and the other 3 dropped instantly, all the way to 2nd order. Qiu Wenran and the other 2 were dumbfounded. It was not their first time entering the astral plane, but how could there be a mission with such a power limit? They might not know what 2nd order represented, but they were very clear that their physical strength was reduced to the innate realm. A mere innate realm couldn't even fly. While the 3 were still in a daze, Ji Yunan had already shouted, "Go!" The 3 looked up instinctively, but saw that Ji Yunan had already run to the edge of the platform, and then directly jumped out. This made them frown at the same time. This was the top floor of a building that was close to 100 meters tall. Normally, they wouldn't care, but now their strength was only at the innate realm. It was this moment of hesitation that made the blood curtain in the sky thicker. The next moment, a meteorite fell from the sky, directly hitting the top of the building. Ji Yunan looked at the 3 people who were turned into ashes and shook his head helplessly. What the hell is going on? Meteorite? Who would have thought that there would be such a situation? What's wrong with the star path? This is clearly a trap. Still on the top of the building, the blood-red countdown was the same as before. Qiu Wenran roared indignantly, while Ji Yunan stood at the side and yawned. It's just the starting point kill. What's so strange about it? You'll know after being tricked once. Ji Nan waved his hand and said, when you encounter the finishing point kill in the future, I'm afraid you'll go crazy. After all, he was an old monster who had lived for thousands of years. After venting his anger, Qiu Wenran calmed down and apologized to the three embarrassedly. Zhuozhuo and Ziyi exchanged glances, then looked at Ji Nan at the same time. We aren't the world controllers. Although we don't fear death, our consciousness can only stay in the star path for a limited time, Ziyi, who was dressed in purple, said with a smile. So, if you have any suggestions for the astral world mission, why don't you tell us? We'll discuss it together. This was Zhuozhuo speaking. The left and right sides of his body were clearly separated. Even when he spoke, his mouth moved up and down differently. However, his voice was very normal, like that of an ordinary child. It looked very strange. Ji Nan frowned slightly, but he didn't refuse. Since the four of them were teammates, they had common interests. There was indeed no need to hide anything. Right now, other than the starting point kill, we don't know anything else. We can only test it slowly. But from the goal of the first stage, this stage should be park hour. Park hour? Qiu Wenran clearly didn't understand what these three words meant. It requires us to reach our destination, and there will be a series of obstacles and even enemies on the way. After saying this, Ji Nan immediately said, you'll understand what park hour means after a few rounds. Let's talk about the starting point kill first. Starting point kill was also a new term, but it was much easier to understand. The meteorite fell too fast. Other than jumping, there's no other way. In the end, we're still too weak, Ziyi said with a frown. She didn't say it out loud, but the others understood. Jumping off the building and landing from a height of more than 100 meters would seriously injure them even if they didn't die. How were they going to continue with the mission? At the end of the day, with their identities, they really weren't used to thinking about problems with the innate level. All the methods they could use in the past were suddenly useless. It was like a super hacker returning to primitive society. No matter how good his skills were, there was nothing he could do. With the power of the innate level, if you want to survive falling from a height of 100 meters, you'll need to be a cultivator who specializes in the physical cultivation system, Qiu Wenran said with a serious expression. Chapter 157. The meteorite fell, and the building was blasted into dust again. But this time, Ji Nan and the others were already standing next to the building, watching it collapse. With his amazing physique, he jumped down from the top of the building and caught his companions who fell one by one. The meteorite didn't affect the surroundings at all. Ji Nan touched his chin. It's like what the players always do. This unscientific phenomenon could only appear in a player-made map. It was the cartographer's bad taste to make the starting point look cool without affecting the subsequent process. We only have 3 minutes. Ji Nan looked up at the sky. The red countdown was still there. The target is the spire in the center of the city. Following Ji Nan's words, the three looked up. There was indeed a spire in the center of the city, and the top of the spire was flashing with red light. Qiu Wenran heaved a sigh of relief. It's not too far. Even if it's only at the innate level, we can still make it. An innate warrior's physique might not be strong, but most of them were not slow. They could run at full speed to the top of the spire. It's difficult to get to the spire. It's not practical to go up from inside the spire. Zhuozhuo's expression didn't look good. There are things in the technological dimension that innate warriors can't compete with. Qiu Wenran was indeed inexperienced. He didn't seem to have experienced many dimensions, so he didn't think about the uniqueness of the technological dimension. Technology was a very unfriendly thing for low-level cultivators. If they used guns or used thick iron gates to block the way to the top of the spire, they would be at a loss. Let's split up and try all the methods we can think of, Ji Nan concluded. Increase efficiency. Trying 4 methods at once was better than taking turns. A moment later, the 4 gathered at the top of the building again, waiting for the countdown. Zhuozhuo and Purple Will felt helpless. They were old astral lords and had traveled the star path for many years, but they had never seen such a strange little world. Killing enemies at a higher level, looking for ghosts, exploring forests. They had encountered all kinds of dangerous situations, but this was the first time. It wasn't that difficult, either. His goal was just to reach his destination. It was much easier than killing an opponent who was stronger than him. However, if one were to say that it was easy, they were still lacking a little bit. No matter what, they could not reach the top of the pagoda. Qiu Wenran, who didn't have much experience, was almost driven crazy by this map. The time spent running was only enough to get to the bottom of the tower, not enough time to go up. Stealing a vehicle would cause the police to chase after him, and he would not be able to enter the tower. If he killed the police, it would attract the attack of the modern army, with tanks and helicopters. Why don't we try jumping over from the roof next door? Qiu Wenran, the old man, had already begun to come up with ideas. Ji Nan rolled his eyes and said, "The top of the tower is more than 300 meters tall. Are you planning to climb it from the outside?" Qiu Wenran had nothing to say, so the four of them fell silent again. The countdown ended again, and the curtain of blood descended. There was almost no need for anyone to say anything. The four of them had long since familiarized themselves with running in the same direction. Ji Nan was the first to jump, and the other three followed closely behind. But this time, when Ji Nan landed, he suddenly had a flash of inspiration and blurted out, "I got it." Bang! 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 Ji Nan's movements slowed down, and suddenly there were 3 piles of meat beside him. "Your Excellency Ji Nan." Qiu Wenran's slightly resentful voice sounded next to him. "Ahum, a good comrade is willing to sacrifice his life for the revolution." Ji Nan coughed lightly as he stood in front of a white car and casually punched the window. This was already a new round of the dungeon. Because of Ji Nan's days, 3 people fell to their deaths, so naturally, they had to start all over again. This time, the 4 of them worked together because Ji Nan claimed to have found a way. The owner of the white car was shocked. He was sitting in the driver's seat waiting for the red light to disappear, but he didn't expect the window to burst. Who are you?" he shouted in panic. "Don't come over, I'm calling the police." Ji Nan responded by grabbing him without the slightest hesitation, directly pulling him out and casually tossing him aside. Ji Nan and the other 3 got in the car as fast as they could, but then Qiu Wenran was a little surprised. "Your Excellency, are we going in the wrong direction?" "Of course not." Ji Nan chuckled. "Stealing a citizen's car will cause the police to chase after you. Did you notice which direction the police came from?" Hearing this, Qiu Wenran was stunned. He had always used the most direct method, which was to rush through the tower, and did not care about these things. Purple Intent, who was in the back seat, said, "Are we going to the police station?" "Yes." Ji Nan casually replied, but the car was getting faster and faster. He did not care about the pedestrians on the road at all, and he crashed into a passerby on the spot. Qiu Wenran wanted to ask what they were going there for, but seeing how Ji Nan drove, he said, "Your Excellency, although we are in a hurry, it's not." Bang! A loud noise interrupted his words. It was a woman who had slammed her head into the front windshield. A large crack appeared on the glass, and the blood on the woman's head dyed Qiu Wenran's vision red. Ji Nan's expression did not even change. He suddenly braked, causing the woman's body to roll forward. Then, he beautifully changed gears and sped up, directly running over her body. This series of actions was so familiar, it was obvious that he was a veteran who did this kind of thing often. When Qiu Wenran looked back, not even a shadow could be seen. "Your Excellency, this, increase efficiency." Ji Nan was still focused on the front, doing everything possible to increase the speed of the car. "They are just mortals and ants. Why do you care?" Zuozwa chuckled from the back seat. He seemed to admire Ji Nan's actions. Purple Intent also said, "These mortals will be trapped in the astral realm for the rest of their lives. It is their honor to help us break out of the astral realm's natural source." Qiu Wenran listened to the 2 of them, and after a moment of silence, he nodded and sighed. "I lost control of my human heart." He had always respected senior Star Lords, so he naturally did not question Zuozwa and Purple Intent's words. He also felt some respect for Ji Nan. This person also regarded human life as nothing more than grass. Perhaps he was also a veteran Star Lord, But Qiu Wenran did not know his real identity. "We're here." Ji Nan slammed on the brakes, almost throwing Qiu Wenran out of the car. He did not even look into the car. He jumped out of the front window and rushed toward the police station. A police officer tried to stop him and ask questions, but before he could even say a word, Ji Nan punched him in the head. However, Ji Nan did not use the main entrance. When he arrived at the police station, he jumped onto the roof and ran along the roof. Qiu Wenran and the other two in the car did not dare to delay when they saw this scene. They hurriedly ran out and followed behind Ji Nan. The police station had never seen such a situation before. It was immediately chaotic, but Ji Nan did not care and continued to jump from roof to roof. A moment later, they heard Ji Nan's surprised voice. "Found it." The three of them turned to look and finally understood what Ji Nan was looking for. Chapter 158. In the depths of the endless starry sky, a magnificent and huge starship slowly emerged from the void. The starship's descent did not make a single sound. There was no sound in the void, but this starship was so huge that it gave people a strong feeling of discomfort. There was also a golden symbol on the starship's body. It was a strange-looking hook. If there were cultivators from the central starfield here, they would definitely recognize the symbol at a glance. It came from the central starfield's deep-sea temple. In just 70 years, I don't think so many things have happened on planet Shenhuang. Inside the starship, an old man in a golden robe sighed as he looked at planet Shenhuang that was getting closer. Beside the old man, a man in a black windbreaker smiled helplessly. Strange existences like the children of Providence are really confusing, so we can only avoid them for now. The man in the black windbreaker was called Ping Zhoushan. He was also a well-known pathmaster on planet Shenhuang. However, because of the rise of the children of Providence in recent decades, he gradually hid his tracks. No one knew that Ping Zhoushan was a bloodline descendant and used to be a servant of the Deep Sea King's temple. "Elder Feng, did you come here for those children of Providence?" Ping Zhoushan asked carefully. In his mind, Feng Shu was one of the oldest seniors in the temple. There was no other possibility for him to come all the way to the 6th starfield other than a strange child of Providence. However, Feng Shu smiled and shook his head. Providence is ethereal. It can be useful for a while, but it is not the great Tao after all. I can only watch it self-destruct. Then, Elder. Ping Zhoushan scratched his head. He could not understand. His Highness has returned to the star realm. Feng Shu's expression gradually became serious. "We want to find a person called Ji Nan." When Ping Zhoushan heard Feng Shu's first sentence, he was completely stunned. Rank 4 bigwigs rarely stayed in the heavenly realms and boundary realms. Most of their time was spent traveling between realms, searching for the world origin to build their own rules. If His Highness, the Deep Sea King, returned personally, it could only mean that there was something he needed here. Then, what will happen after we find that person? Ping Zhoushan's voice trembled. Feng Shu glanced at him and said in a deep voice, "His Highness will come personally." Ji Nan still did not know that the Deep Sea King had already chosen the smartest method to track him. He did not rashly enter the 6-star region, nor did he make a scene to expose Ji Nan. Instead, he chose to send a representative to secretly search for Ji Nan. However, this was none of Ji Nan's business. He was slowly approaching his destination from mid-air, the city's central tower. The roar of the helicopter resounded through the sky. Ji Nan's driving skills were good, but he couldn't fly a plane. The helicopter kept swaying left and right in mid-air, so Qiu Wenran and the other two could only hold on to the handrail tightly to ensure that they would not be thrown off. "Sir, shouldn't we get someone who knows how to fly a plane?" Qiu Wenran shouted at Ji Nan in the strong wind, but his voice was blown away by the wind. However, Ji Nan still had time to free one hand and waved behind him. "Although I'm not good at flying, I'm good at shooting." As soon as Ji Nan finished speaking, a miniature missile shot out and directly blew up the intercepting helicopter. As a professional player, it was necessary to be proficient in all kinds of small games. Because you didn't know when the designer would give you a puzzle game to play. Therefore, Ji Nan could be said to be very proficient in this kind of simple aiming skill. After another exciting battle, The helicopter that Ji Nan and the other three were on finally reached the top of the central tower. Ji Nan jumped down without hesitation. The moment he touched the top of the tower, the world seemed to stop again. The countdown in midair also slowly disappeared, and a new screen appeared. There were only 10 seconds left on the countdown. Ji Nan's decision to increase efficiency was indeed the right decision. First stage met. Second stage, kill the Scarlet Guard. Victory condition, all 4 players must survive. Power limit, level 3. As the screen appeared, Ji Nan and the others felt their bodies relax at the same time, as if some inexplicable restraint was released, and the sealed power returned to their bodies. At this time, the top of the tower gradually cracked open. Ji Nan let go without hesitation and stood in midair. After regaining his supernatural power, he could fly. Looks like rank 3 refers to the transcendent level, Zwazwa said as the other 3 arrived at his side. Now that he had regained his strength, the disharmony between his 2 bodies seemed more obvious. When he spoke, the left side of his face gradually twisted, but the right side was normal. Qiu Wenran also nodded. It should be. I don't know what system it's based on. Could it be that it doesn't come from this world? As he said this, he couldn't help but look at Ji Nan in surprise. In the world of the Heavenly Star Path, the missions came from the controller themselves. This was very likely from Ji Nan. However, he was not stupid enough to ask directly. If the other party did not intend to say it, asking would only make them enemies. There was not much time left for the 4 of them. In a short moment, the top of the tower had completely cracked open, and a blood-colored figure walked out. Ha 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 ha. I didn't think that I would be discovered after hiding here for 20 years. If that's the case, all of you can die. The blood-colored figure laughed as soon as he appeared, and then said loudly, "Who are you?" Qiu Wenran asked in a low voice. However, the blood-colored figure flew and slashed at Qiu Wenran, but he did not answer. Instead, he said, "Damn fleas, I'll kill you all." The shape of his blade was very strange. It looked more like a sickle, but it was not as curved, and it also had a long handle. Good. Qiu Wenran shouted softly, "I'll have to trouble the 3 of you to hold the line for me. Let me try this first, huh?" Before he could finish his sentence, the blood-colored scythe suddenly sped up, and Qiu Wenran seemed to be stunned as he was beheaded by the scythe. When the player died, the mission was immediately declared a failure, and the blood curtain reactivated. Fortunately, the first stage had been completed, and the scene of the top of the tower cracking open reappeared. If they had to go through the first stage again, they would really go crazy. Qiu Wenran awkwardly reappeared, and he looked at Ji Nan and the others with a red face. In the end, it was Ji Nan who coughed and said, "What skill was that?" Just now, Qiu Wenran had been standing still, which was clearly not normal. However, he helplessly scratched his head. "I just felt that my entire mind had been sealed, and I couldn't move at all. I couldn't tell what skill it was either." "Let me try," Purple Will suddenly said. Qiu Wenran instantly breathed a sigh of relief. With Senior Purple Will helping, that would be great. Meanwhile, the top of the tower had already cracked open again, and the 4 people's familiar laughter could be heard. Chapter 159. Planet Shenhuang, White Mist Headquarters. Red Tail was sitting in a quiet room. She was holding the information she had just received. She smiled and said, "It is Feng Shu. It looks like Mr. Feng really cares about our commander." They were both from the Blood-Dependent Alliance, so Red Tail knew what kind of person Feng Shu was. Ignoring his background, Feng Shu's position in the Alliance was higher than hers. That was, of course, if you didn't count the things that happened in the dark. Lin Yunyun was sitting next to her. She quietly said, "Mister, I told you, when no one is around, you can call me Mom." Red Tail interrupted her and stroked her head. Lin Yunyun bit her lips. "Mom. How strong is Break World level?" "Very, very strong." Red Tail laughed and said, "One person can destroy an entire planet." "Then, why does Uncle want to mess with them?" Lin Yunyun frowned. She did not seem to understand the question. From what she could remember, her uncle had never encountered a situation like this before. "I want to know, too." Red Tail's gaze gradually drifted away and became a little erratic. What is it that can make that person prepare to descend personally? Ji Yunan has something to do with the white mist. After Feng Shu read the latest report, he frowned. Ping Jiushan nodded. According to the information, after Ji Yunan came to planet Shenhuang, he went to the White Mist and fought Sand King. In the end, no one has seen Sand King ever since. After saying that, Ping Jiushan could not help but feel scared. It was not that he did not know about the fight, but it was just an interesting story. He did not expect it to involve Mr. Feng Shu. Now that he thought about it, did Sand King die? Sand King is dead. Feng Shu stroked his beard and squinted his eyes. The white mist is still there. It looks like that woman is working with Ji Yunan. Are you talking about Red Tail? How is that possible? Ping Jiushan was shocked. Nothing is impossible. Red Tail is not a simple character. Void Wind shook his head. She won't admit it even if we ask her directly. Let's start from the inside of the white mist. Feng Shu handed Ping Jiushan a piece of paper with a name written on it, Guan Sheng. Ha 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 ha. I didn't expect that I would hide here for 20 years. The exact same words came out of the Scarlet Guard's mouth, and the exact same scarlet scythe fell. Purple Will was calm and unruffled, continuously laying down 30 purple shadows in front of him. It could be said to be airtight, but it still didn't work. The blood-red scythe cut through 30 purple shadows in a row, instantly splitting the purple intent into two. Damned fleas, I'll kill you all. That was what he had said. The four of them returned. This time, Qiu Wenran's expression was even more unsightly. He did not feel that the death of Purple Will was anything to be happy about. This only showed how troublesome this saber strike was. After the Purple Will reappeared, he frowned and said in a deep voice, "Seal all rules, saber of impending death." Rule of impending death. Qiu Wenran gasped. There was no doubt that such a rule was powerful, but he did not expect to encounter it here. The so-called rule of impending death referred to the declaration of the enemy's death under certain conditions. Unless there was a rule at the same level as the enemy, there was no way to escape. What are the conditions for impending death? Zhuo's cheeks had the same expression, which was rare. They both looked like they were deep in thought. At this time, Ji Yunan suddenly interrupted, "Maybe, flying is forbidden." A moment later, the four of them landed safely in front of the Scarlet Guard, and the Scarlet Scythe did not appear again. That's it. You used the rule of impending death just for this? Qiu Wenran gritted his teeth. In fact, it was not only him. Zhuo and Purple Will had similar thoughts, but they were shrewd enough not to lose their composure on the spot. Ji Yunan shook his head helplessly. In fact, the line "damned fleas" had already hinted at this point, but because it was too simple, the three of them did not want to believe it. For Ji Yunan, this was the most reasonable thing to do. It was just the beginning. The system would not make things difficult for the players. In the game, impending death was just a rule. There was nothing to be stingy about. However, this situation made Ji Yunan even more certain that this dungeon had been modified according to his memory. If that's the case, this boss is probably not going to be easy. Ji Yunan shook his head. He had no confidence that these NPCs would not be able to clear this dungeon. An hour later, the four of them reunited for the 29th time at the beginning of the second stage. The three of you, my time in the star path has reached its limit. I can only continue next time, Purple Will said helplessly, stopping the next attempt. The Star Lord entered the star path with his consciousness, so he could not stay for too long. This was inevitable. Zhuo nodded lightly. This world is indeed a little strange. Be prepared next time. Then let's set it to 3 days from now. Is there any inconvenience? Purple Will asked again. Zhuo and Qiu Wenran shook their heads, but Ji Yunan frowned. 3 days. Time flows differently in different worlds. How do we determine the time? A smile appeared on Zhuo's face. The right side of her face was kind, while the left side was twisted. 36 heavens and 72 boundaries have the same time. So that's how it is. Ji Yunan came to a sudden understanding and seemed to have understood something. In the small house, Ji Yunan slowly opened his eyes. He was still thinking about the star path in the heavens, but he was sighing softly. In the second stage, what caused the four of them to be wiped out 30 times in a row was not a powerful enemy, but a very simple game technique. The 3 Star Lords were indeed very powerful. The battle prowess that each of them could display was far beyond the level of a third stage. Even Ji Nan did not dare to say that he could win against them for sure. Therefore, the Scarlet Protector was beaten to the point where he could not fight back. However, every time he was on the verge of death, he would split into 40 small protectors. Each of the 40 small protectors was different and had to be killed in a fixed order. Otherwise, they would all self-destruct. It's just killing 40 small monsters in a fixed order. Is it really that difficult? Ji Nan shook his head helplessly. At this step, there would always be people who made mistakes. However, he also understood that from the perspective of the NPCs, killing people in a fixed order was very difficult to accept. The strong all had their own inherent understanding of the world. They could not understand this overly artificial design. He opened the evil god's temple to check. There was already a new message that he did not receive in the private dungeon. Private dungeon Splendid Worlds first stage completed. Obtained 300 points. 300 points was not bad. It was probably because the reward for the first time was relatively high. It would definitely not be so high in the future. Ji Nan was very clear about this. This way, he already had 1,700 points, and his sin points had also reached 450 points under land size efforts. He was one step closer to the 4th stage. Ji Nan's consciousness withdrew from the evil god's temple. After thinking for a while, he wrote down the names Zhuozhuo, Purple Will, and Qiu Wenran. He used a secret method to send it back to the White Fog and asked Red Tail to help investigate. Ji Nan was also very curious about these 3 temporary companions. However, at this moment, there was a sudden knock on his door. Before Ji Nan could do anything, the door was pushed open, and an unexpected person appeared in front of him. Chapter 160. Ji Nan's whole body stiffened for a moment, but then he returned to normal, but a shadow body had already quietly floated far away, ready for him to switch places at any time. It seems that you really don't want to see me. The smile on Zhuozhuo's face was still the same, half normal and half twisted. A rank 3 main body? That's surprising. Rank 3? You surprise me too. Ji Nan raised his eyebrows slightly, looking at the guy in front of him, who looked extraordinary from his appearance to his aura. Slightly different from what he saw in the dungeon, Zhuozhuo in reality could no longer be described as a little boy. Because his left and right sides were completely equal, but completely different. The body on the left was completely a blonde girl, not only with half a sun hat on her head, but even she was wearing a pure white dress. The one on the right was still the peaceful-looking boy, who seemed to be a combination of 2 people. There's nothing to be surprised about. Zhuozhuo smiled and said, those who have been to Beyond the Heavens know what ranks are. Beyond the Heavens, Ji Nan was silent for a while, then he yawned and returned to his chair. Just say what you want, Ji Nan said casually. He was not stupid enough to ask nonsense like how did you get here? Obviously, she would not tell the truth. I want a place in all of your small worlds in the future. Zhuozhuo's 2 faces showed a strange smile at the same time, and she said in a low voice. That's it. Ji Nan's expression didn't change at all. In his opinion, this condition was not a condition at all. After all, the other party was a rank 5 or even higher existence. Perhaps it was not her main body that had arrived, but it was enough to completely suppress him. In this case, Ji Nan did not want to bet on whether he had a chance to escape. Zhuozhuo did not comment. When she was about to speak, her expression suddenly changed, and her figure instantly disappeared, leaving only a sentence echoing. After you reach rank 4, come to the central starfield, and someone will pick you up. This Star-Lord level powerhouse disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye, as if she had never been there. A strange smile appeared on Ji Nan's face. 3 days later, Ji Nan sat quietly in the yard, looking through the information in his hands. This was the news sent by White Mist. As for the 3 Star-Lords in the dungeon, only the name Qiu Wenran had some clues, but it was pitifully little. All they knew was that he was an expert who had made a name for himself several thousand years ago. Furthermore, he was active outside of the astral plane, so they could only find some scattered records of him. While they knew that such a person existed, there was no way to investigate his deeds. Purple Will, from the name to the identity, did not leave a single trace. Zwazwa, on the other hand, didn't have any information related to his name, but his strange appearance allowed the people in the white mist to find some traces of him. That was a legend that had been passed down since ancient times. It was a story from the time when the central star region had just risen and was gradually expanding outwards. At that time, the central star region was in a period of rapid technological development. The local system was under attack, and there were many Frankenstein monsters. There was an evil doctor who was obsessed with human fusion experiments. When he was wanted by the Federation and had nowhere else to go, he resolutely chose to fuse his son and daughter together as materials. The fusion of siblings of the same origin? I don't know if it's true or just a joke. Ji Yunan rubbed his chin and pondered. After all, this was just an ancient legend. After tens of thousands of years of evolution, he was afraid that it had already changed beyond recognition. After thinking about it, he finally put the information aside. It would be best if he could find out where Zwazwa came from, but it was not a big deal if he couldn't. He didn't have any conflict with him. Instead, they had common interests, so there was no need to worry. However, there was another piece of news from the White Mist, which made Ji Yunan frown. The king of the deep sea had chosen to send people to planet Shenhuang to secretly investigate his whereabouts. As expected, no one who could become a rank 4 big shot was a fool. Previously, with the epaulette that Qin Xuanji obtained, she didn't kill him in one blow. This time, she didn't leave any flaws. His main body had returned to the astral plane, which meant that he could personally take action through the medium at any time. This was no longer a blow that contained part of his power, but an attack from the main body of a rank 4 expert. Once I come face to face with the people he sends, I'm afraid that I will immediately attract a rank 4 attack. It seems that I still need to hide for a while. Ji Yunan's consciousness looked at the evil god's temple. His sin value had reached 455 points, and the growth rate was obviously much faster. It seemed that locking Lan Sai up and making her practice hard was effective. It could also be that the previous experience of being seriously injured had stimulated her. Casually destroying the scroll with the information, Ji Yunan slowly got up and opened the private instance again. It was already the time that they had agreed on. In the depths of the endless starry sky, in a hidden and deep palace, there seemed to be inexhaustible starlight around the palace. In this eternal palace, there was a faint red light, starting from the top of the palace, all the way to the bottom. Until the red light slowly spread out, even the stars had to retreat. A figure walked out of the palace. It was a woman in red. She was not tall, but her eyebrows were full of a heroic spirit, and her red hair hung down like a blood-colored waterfall. She stood on the endless stars, and after a long time, she sighed softly. His back. Your Majesty. A voice came from behind the woman in red. It was a middle-aged man wrapped in a red robe. Do you want us to search the entire realm? You won't be able to find him. The woman shook her head lightly. Tell Shui Yang to go to the 6-star region and find a little guy named Red Tail. Yes, Your Majesty. The middle-aged man responded and then said, Your Majesty, Red Tail of the Bloodline clan is the descendant of Senior Qingqiu. Red Tail did have a certain amount of weight in the eyes of some big figures, and even the middle-aged man remembered her. Oh, so it's her. How interesting. A smile appeared on the woman's face, which looked no different from an ordinary person's. The descendant of Qingqiu found out about her sworn enemy. Did she expose her identity, or did someone secretly arrange it? The woman in red didn't speak anymore. She just stood on the palace and looked down at the billions of stars. Of course, Ji Yunan didn't know that his asking Red Tail to find out about some people had attracted the attention of a real big figure. Even if he knew, he would probably complain that he was wronged. After all, he had sent the message first, and Zwazwa had only just appeared. However, he didn't have the time to pay attention to this. After reopening the private instance of Splendid World, Purple Will and Qiu Wenran quickly followed the coordinates, but Zwazwa disappeared. Chapter 161. What's going on? Is there no internet at home? Jiyu Nan complained in words that only he could understand. Zwa had actually disappeared. It was obvious that the astral world was more important to him than this dungeon. What he said about bringing him along for all future dungeons was obviously just a stalling tactic. He didn't care about that at all. Maybe he ran into some trouble. Let's begin. Purple Wool didn't seem to feel anything and said calmly. Jiyu Nan obviously didn't have any objections. With their strength, this dungeon was completely over the limit. If it wasn't for the system's restrictions, they could have just crushed it. The blood-colored countdown in the air appeared again. They had to start the dungeon again. Fortunately, with the experience from the first time, it was a walk in the park. Jiyu Nan once again succeeded in the first stage of park hour. Ha 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 ha. I didn't think that I would hide here for 20 years. A familiar laughter sounded. Purple Wool said, I'll do it this time. As she said this, she suddenly leaped into the air. The entire sky was instantly filled with purple stars, which then smashed towards the Bloodguard one by one. This murderous look scared Jiyu Nan and Little Red, and they hurriedly hid to the side to watch the show. In terms of combat, the Bloodguard obviously couldn't compare to the Star Master. In just a few hits, it was smashed to a pulp by the stars. When it was at the end of its tether and was about to transform into 40 little guards, Purple Wool suddenly raised her hand. The stars in the sky lit up with purple light at the same time. They all fell and smashed the Bloodguard into pieces. The blood-colored screen in the sky also changed. Second stage condition met. Third stage, survive for 3 minutes. Victory condition, all 3 players must survive. Power limit, level 3. The whole process didn't take more than a minute. Purple Wool had found a suitable method. She used an overpowered skill to forcefully prevent the Bloodguard from using his clone skills. This F*King kill line is probably at 20% HP. Jiyu Nan cursed in his heart. Before the boss HP dropped to a certain level, they could directly kill it. Of course, they could avoid the follow-up skills. This was a very simple method. But you also need to have such a godly killing technique. At the very least, Jiyu Nan's Great Treasure Sword's beheading line was far from this high. This Purple Wool move was purely relying on its own heaven-defying laws. After all, they're Star-Lord NPCs. None of them are fools. Jiyu Nan shook his head inwardly. If I can't react in time at the beginning, I'll be stumped. But if I have some time to think, it'll be easy to come up with a solution. Meanwhile, Chiu Wenran had already welcomed him with an excited expression. As expected of Senior Purple Will, you grasped the Starnet laws in 3 days, and you were even able to fuse them into your own laws. It's just normal, Ziyi replied expressionlessly. This extremely arrogant lady obviously couldn't bear the fact that she was forced to interrupt the mission because of her. Therefore, when she came this time, she broke through the second stage alone. In the headquarters of the White Fog, Chu Kang excitedly walked out of the endless void. He had just completed a reincarnation mission, and it was much easier than he had imagined. That lord, who is he? No matter who he is, it would be great if he could still come and teach. Chu Kang could not help but look forward to it as he recalled the scene from last time. If there was a second chance, he swore that he would definitely hand over all the missions he could find to that lord. Guansheng, are you home? Chu Kang knocked on Guansheng's door next door, but there was no response. That's strange. Did he already go to hand in the mission? Reincarnation missions would not take up much time, especially missions in small worlds, which almost did not take up any time here. After a long time without any response, Chu Kang suppressed the questions in his heart and turned to walk outside. However, he happened to bump into someone at the corner. Ayo, you. Hey, Guansheng. Chu Kang's head was knocked, and he was about to speak when he saw the other person's face clearly. Guansheng, however, was in a hurry and did not even have the time to respond to Chu Kang. He pushed him aside and walked toward his own room. Faced with Guansheng's impoliteness, Chu Kang did not mind at all. Instead, his eyes lit up, and he hurriedly followed. Guansheng, why are you in such a hurry? Is that lord here again? He had not forgotten the reason why he had seen Guansheng like this the last time. Hearing Chu Kang mention a certain person, Guan Sheng's expression changed instantly, but he immediately returned to normal. He quickly said, "No. I have something urgent to attend to, move aside." Chu Kang was chased aside by him again, while Guan Sheng entered the room by himself. Bang! The room door was slammed shut, and Chu Kang could only shrug his shoulders after being snubbed. However, his expression immediately changed. This was because there was clearly a violent energy fluctuation coming from Guan Sheng's room. "Guan Sheng!" Chu Kang shouted and kicked the door open, but Guan Sheng was already nowhere to be seen. Chu Kang looked at the ground with rapt attention, only to see that there was an exquisite small formation drawn there. Even with Chu Kang's lack of proficiency in formations, he could tell that this was clearly a teleportation formation. The organization clearly has a teleportation formation. Why did he set it up privately? Chu Kang's heart sank. He had a premonition that he had stepped into a huge whirlpool. In the small room, Red Tail was still reading the report below unhurriedly. One hand was gently placed on Lin Yunyun's shoulder, caressing her beautiful hair. Lin Yunyun seemed to be unused to such intimate actions. She kept her head lowered, her eyes passively reading the report on the table. The Netherworld Sea Dojo has reopened, and the dojo master, Ping Joshan, has reappeared. The Netherworld Sea Dojo is located in the extreme north. The King of the North, Yi Chen, personally led the troops to conquer. The North region's army was defeated, and Yi Chen's whereabouts are unknown. There's news that he's severely injured and dying. These reports attracted her attention. Even though she did not pay attention to the situation of the continent, she knew how popular the title King of the North region was. However, the King of the North region, who had never been defeated since his debut, had suffered a great defeat this time, and even his whereabouts were unknown. As if noticing what she was looking at, Red Tail chuckled and said, "He's just a lucky guy who relied on the power of Providence. He's nothing when he meets a true powerhouse." As she said this, a report slowly appeared. According to the location, it came from the organization. Red Tail frowned slightly, having a bad feeling in her heart. She quickly picked up the report and read it, but a moment later, she slammed the table. "Guan Sheng." Lin Yunyun was shocked and quickly asked, "Mother, what's wrong?" Chapter 162. In the splendid world, Ji Yunan, Qiu Wenran, and Purple Wool stood side by side, looking at the magma that covered the entire city. The third stage, survival, was easier than they had imagined. After a few attempts, the three of them easily passed, and it did not take long from beginning to end. The third stage, to put it bluntly, was a rain of magma from the sky. It tested the player's resistance and reaction ability, and it was a test of hard strength. This was in line with the design of the dungeon. At the beginning, it would give the players a show of strength, then cut in from the tricky difficulty, requiring the players to be flexible, and finally, it would be a test of hard strength. However, for Ji Yunan's team, it did not work at all, because they did not lack hard strength. Therefore, the entire third stage was basically not difficult for the three of them, and soon, it was time for the dungeon to end. According to this difficulty, the overall reward will not be too much. I wonder if I can get 2,500 points. Ji Yunan muttered to himself. He now had 2,100 points, and was 400 points away from the 2,500 mark. The first and second stages gave him 300 and 400 points respectively. The third stage would probably not be much, but it should not be lower than before. In order to avoid accidents, Ji Yunan had to plan ahead and said, "Do you still want to farm?" What he received was a surprised look from the two. Qiu Wenran smiled and said, "Your Excellency, the small world mission has been completed once, and the world's origin has been seen by us. It is useless to do it a second time." The world's origin again. Ji Yunan had some understanding. For the powerhouses of this world, this was probably the foundation of their cultivation. Using the world's origin to perfect their own rules, and then further perfect their own world. This was the case for them, but it might not be the case for Ji Yunan himself. He remembered that the dungeon clearly stated that the reset period was 3 days. After returning to reality, Ji Yunan immediately checked the evil god's temple and saw this message. Private Dungeon Splendid World's third stage completed, obtained 500 points. 500 point. With these 500 points, Ji Yunan's points finally broke through the 2,500 mark, reaching 2,600 points, enough for him to level up. Next, I just need to wait for Lan Sai's side. Ji Yunan took a look at his sin value, 458 points. There was still a gap from his goal. However, Ji Yunan could not think of anything for the time being. Reincarnation hadn't reached its cooldown time yet. His soul couldn't bear it, so he could only wait patiently. But at this moment, he noticed that 2 more messages had arrived from the white fog. What was even stranger was that the contents of the 2 messages were similar. They both said that his location had been exposed and that he should move immediately. Near the central mountain range, Feng Shu appeared in midair and slowly descended to the ground. This time, he was traveling light and did not bring any attendants with him. Only Ping Jiushan and another person traveled with him. This person had a somewhat dull expression. It was Guan Sheng, who had escaped from the white fog. Feng Shu and Ping Jiushan did not recognize Ji Yunan. Even though they had seen his appearance from the information, they were not as familiar as Guan Sheng. Therefore, they naturally had to bring him along. Since you escaped from the white fog, Red Tail will probably send a message to Ji Yunan soon. Are you sure he will stay here? Ping Jiushan was still not sure if he could find Ji Yunan. Guan Sheng said expressionlessly, Sir's order was to keep him here for a while. That's right. Feng Shu nodded lightly. After receiving Ji Yunan's location, I have already sealed this mountain range. If he escapes, he will trigger the mark I left behind. Feng Shu was famous for being good at hunting and searching in the deep sea shrine. Therefore, he was the one who came this time. Then how can you keep him here? Ping Jiushan asked again. A smile appeared on Guan Sheng's dull face. I sent him a message in advance. Guan Sheng was very good at playing with people's hearts. At least in this case, what he did was very clever. Even Red Tail did not expect Guan Sheng to do something like this. She was in a hurry to get away from him. Red Tail's position was to not offend either side. She would not go against a break-world elite for Ji Yunan. She would not help Deep Sea King kill Ji Yunan. To her, it did not matter who won or lost. She only needed to stand on the side of the winner. It was a shame Guan Sheng had ruined her plan. The white fog had told Feng Shu where Ji Yunan was. If Ji Yunan could turn the tables, would he believe there was a traitor in the organization? So, she was in a rush to send a message to Ji Yunan. Of course, Red Tail did not expect that no matter what she said, he would not believe it. 2 messages. Ji Yunan rubbed his chin, but there was a sneer on his lips. This strange action made people think that there was a problem inside the white fog. Perhaps someone had set up a trap. Perhaps Red Tail had chosen to stand against him. At this time, it did not matter if he listened to the other's opinion or remained the same. There was a risk. So, Ji Yunan turned into a shadow. He silently hid in the depths of the mountains. In the middle of the mountains, there was a stream. A girl in cotton clothes was walking in the mountains. She was carrying a basket on her back. She was picking wild fruits from the mountains. She did not look special. She was just a girl from the countryside who was out picking fruits. There were some things in the world that required luck. In the stream, there was a young man in a blue warrior suit. He was lying unconscious in the water. He had dashing eyebrows and starry eyes. His body was well proportioned, and he had a long sword on his waist. When the girl saw this, she put down the fruit and went forward. Hey, are you still alive? Wake up. The young man began to wake up as if he was touched by something from the outside world. Just as he opened his eyes and the 2 of them looked into each other's eyes, it was as if a star had suddenly lit up on the horizon. I see, you still can't find him? Feng Shu had already searched the entire mountain range 3 times, but he still could not find Ji Yunan, causing him to frown. Guan Sheng's face began to break out in cold sweat. He began to worry that he might have outsmarted himself. What if Ji Yunan was too straightforward or Red Tail did not act as he expected? Master, do you want me to send someone to search? Ping Jiushan asked softly. Yes. Feng Shu nodded lightly and said, there are many cultivators in the mountain range. Did you expect them and send them here? Ping Jiushan dared not admit that. He waved his hand and said, Of course not. They're here to track Yi Chen. Yi Chen? That son of fortune? Feng Shu's expression changed slightly as he squinted. Chapter 163. The son of fortune is manipulated by the heaven and earth. As long as he doesn't die, his every move must be in accordance with the will of the heavens. It's not that simple, Feng Shu said with a dark face. Clearly, he knew more about the son of fortune than the people on planet Shenhuang. Ping Jiushan did not care. Just as he was about to speak, the sky suddenly lit up with starlight. I see. A soft sigh echoed in everyone's ears. Ping Jiushan and Guan Sheng did not know what was happening. They looked around in shock, but Feng Shu's face suddenly changed. Master, this is... Feng Shu looked at the sky. He struggled to say, someone is leveling up to break world. Ji Yunan was still a shadow, hiding in the deepest part of the mountains. Feng Shu and the others had passed by a few times, but he did not make a sound. It was like he had become a real shadow. Ji Yunan had always been confident in his hidden shadow. Ever since he came to this world, aside from being seen through by an old man named Jiang, it had never failed. Unless they sent out a grade 4 being to search him, he was not worried about his safety. But when the starlight lit up and the sigh echoed in his heart, he knew he could not hide anymore. It was not because of the sigh, but because of the message from the evil god temple. Evil event triggered, daughter of thousand Buddha. Beside the stream, Yi Chen looked at the girl in front of him. He could not say anything. His life had been one of struggle. He had gone from a good-for-nothing to the king of the north. His experiences were enough to be adapted into a legendary novel. He did not lack women. From childhood sweethearts to royal princesses, there were too many girls who fell in love with him. But this was the first time Yi Chen had felt his heart beat so fast. This girl was like a gift from the heavens. She was perfect and flawless. She walked into Yi Chen's heart. Why? Why are you looking at me like that? The girl lowered her head. Her cheeks blushed. At that moment, there was the sound of hurried footsteps. A group of people from the underworld sea dojo had arrived. They surrounded the two of them in the blink of an eye. The leader said excitedly, Yi Chen, you have nowhere to go. Surrender immediately. Yi Chen stood up slowly and shielded the girl behind him. He said while grinning coldly, even if I, Yi Chen, am a tiger who has fallen from grace, I'm not someone you can bully. After all, he was the king of the northern region. No one dared to step forward after hearing Yi Chen's resolute words. Yi Chen's expression changed slightly. He suddenly carried the young lady and broke out of the encirclement. Damn it, he's faking it. The leader immediately reacted and said exasperatedly, chase after him. Yi Chen revealed a disdainful smile as he ran away while carrying the young lady. This group of idiots, if I can be surrounded by them, then I. Huh. 3 figures stood in front of him, and Ping Jiushan was sneering. However, Feng Shu ignored him. He only stared at the young lady on Yi Chen's shoulder and mumbled, Buddha. Yi Chen's face turned pale when he was stopped by the 3 of them. Of course, he recognized Feng Shu. It was difficult for him to fight Feng Shu when he was at his peak. Now, he was in grave danger. With the delay, the pursuers behind him got closer. The first person had already slashed down with his sword. Ah! The young lady screamed. However, at that moment, something strange happened. A golden gleam began to shine from between her brows. The sword that was slashing down was destroyed directly, but the golden gleam was getting brighter and brighter until no one dared to look at it directly. If someone were to look at her now, they would see that there was a question mark between her brows. The worded. A token flew out of Feng Shu's chest slowly and transformed into a shadow. The shadow was covered in armor, which seemed to be some sort of navy uniform. It was the projection of the Deep Sea King. Your Highness, Feng Shu and the other 2 knelt on one knee immediately and greeted respectfully. The reincarnation of 10,000 Buddhas, awakening from 9,000 lives, the Deep Sea King sighed softly and said, I never thought this prophecy would come true here. Subsequently, he lifted his head again and looked at the sky far away. His face under the armor was expressionless. Heavenly secret. It's you again. Awakening the 10,000 Buddhas in advance. You dare to do such a thing? The Deep Sea King's voice seemed to have a hint of laughter, as though he was gloating over something. Seeing the Deep Sea King appear, Feng Shu hurriedly asked, "Your Highness, that Jiyu Nan might be in this mountain range." "That little friend?" "He is, and he's right beside us." The Deep Sea King nodded lightly. His power was far beyond the transcendent realm. Naturally, Jiyu Nan's location could not be hidden from him. Some sort of strange power slowly descended, and a shadow was instantly revealed. It was Jiyu Nan's figure. Jiyu Nan's face showed a trace of helplessness. This was not his fault. Who would have thought that such an inexplicable scene would directly draw out the Deep Sea King? However, he was much calmer now. He had already seen a Star Lord who was far above the 5th rank in reality. Why would he care about a 4th rank? Moreover, it was not that he could not escape at all. It was just that the current situation made him not in a hurry to leave. His gaze landed on the young lady. She was currently floating in midair, and the Buddhist seals around her were increasing, floating around her. The crime incident was his best chance to step into the 4th rank. The Deep Sea King's power had completely locked onto him. Facing a 4th rank head-on, Jiyu Nan could not fight back at all. He could not use any of his laws. He only had one chance to attack. As the golden light on the young lady's body grew brighter, Yi Chen's gaze became more and more mesmerized. There seemed to be some sort of power that was attracting him to this young lady. In the next moment, the young lady suddenly opened her eyes. "Under the heavens and on the earth, I am the only one." Even though there was no sound, this sentence appeared in everyone's heart. The young lady's eyes were filled with indifference, as if she was looking down at the mortals from a high place. She raised her hand and pointed at the sky. The clouds in the sky instantly split into half, and a purplish-black cloud was already floating there. Meanwhile, the golden light on the young lady's body gradually retracted and landed on the ground beneath her feet. One gold and one purple, one sky and one earth. A single thought to become a Buddha or a single thought to become a demon. "Buddha, please choose." A voice seemed to come from the sky, and a figure was slowly walking over from there. It was the prophet sect master. At this moment, he was not dressed like a scholar. The folding fan and silk scarf had been thrown aside. Instead, he looked like a Taoist priest, wearing a green Taoist robe. After saying this, he did not look over there. Instead, he bowed to the Deep Sea King. "Greetings, Your Highness." The Deep Sea King did not deny it. He only said, using the luck of a galaxy to forcefully awaken the Buddha who has yet to reincarnate. "What a trick. You flatter me." The prophet sect master only smiled and turned to look at Jiyu Nan. He also bowed and said, "Fellow Jiyu, we meet again." Jiyu Nan could not make any expression now, so he did not even say anything. He just rolled his eyes in response. The prophet sect master did not mind. He asked the Deep Sea King, "I heard that Your Highness has a good relationship with the Buddha realm. I wonder what Your Highness thinks the Buddha will choose." Becoming a Buddha after reincarnating for 10,000 lives. Even if there are only 9,000 lives, it should not be too far off, the Deep Sea King said calmly. As if to prove his words, the young lady in midair, one on the left and the other on the right, were glowing with golden and purple light. They were fighting each other. However, not long after, the golden light started to win and started to push the purple light to a corner. Wherever the purple light passed, bloody holes started to appear on the young lady's body. Blood flowed freely, but the young lady's expression was still cold. Otherwise, the prophet sect master laughed softly. Becoming a Buddha after 10,000 lives, waking up after 9,000 lives is naturally not possible. After saying this, he looked at Jiyu Nan. "Fellow Jiyu, what do you think?" The Deep Sea King frowned slightly. The prophet sect master had asked him twice, which made him realize something. Without thinking, he slammed his palm down, and a terrifying power directly descended on the top of Jiyu Nan's head. He only needed to keep Jiyu Nan alive and interrogate him about the whereabouts of the God's Stone. There was no such thing as holding back. Jiyu Nan looked at the prophet sect master's smile and felt the power in midair, so he grinned. In the next moment, he appeared in midair, right behind the young lady. The power of the law was completely sealed, but Jiyu Nan still had skills, and he still had flash attack that could allow him to break through all the lock. The Deep Sea King's expression changed under his armor. The Buddha, who had not fully awakened, did not have the power he had in the past. This was forcing him to make a decision immediately. He stretched out his hand, wanting to hit Ji Yunan, but Ji Yunan was faster. With the shadow sword in hand, Ji Yunan looked at the bloody holes on the young lady's body and used a skill without hesitation. Chapter 164. The Judgment of Justice, nicknamed by the players as the Great Sword, was a very special skill because it dealt true damage based on the remaining HP. How was one to determine the amount of HP in reality? Ji Yunan didn't know how the evil god's temple determined the damage, but he knew one thing: as long as the opponent was injured and bleeding, it would definitely deal damage. With the current state of the female Buddha, there was no need for a fatal attack. Just a little bit of interference was enough to doom her. Ji Yunan was very clear about this. Being able to accurately analyze the situation on the battlefield was also a necessary quality for an expert player. The power of the precept only broke away a little, causing the shadow sword to appear dim. However, the white light on the tip of the sword revealed an indescribable power. Ji Yunan's sword stabbed down fiercely, but just as the tip of the sword was about to touch the girl, she suddenly turned around. Her tightly closed eyes opened again. This time, they weren't shining with a golden light, but with a purple and black light with endless demonic intent. The golden mark between the girl's eyebrows, the D character, was now being infiltrated bit by the purple, and in the blink of an eye, it had completely turned purple. The power of the great sword didn't make the heaven and earth tremble this time. It didn't even cause any more injuries to the girl. This was because the moment she turned around, the aura on her body had suddenly become extremely powerful. It was so powerful that even Tianji Dao Lord, who was already one step into the 4th rank, couldn't compare to it. Perhaps only the unfathomable Deep Sea King could compare to the current her. A golden light flashed, and Ji Yunan was instantly blasted away. Half of his body was smashed into pieces, and his injury was even more serious than when he was hit by the Deep Sea King. From a mortal to the 4th rank, the power of Buddhist reincarnation was indeed extraordinary. Ji Yunan fell to the ground like a pile of mud, and even his head was split in half. However, his cerebral cortex was directly in contact with the ground, giving him a strange sensation. But with the unreasonable damage reduction of passivation, Ji Yunan didn't die. His consciousness was still clear because he had already felt the vibration from the evil god's temple. Completed event: 1000 Buddha True Maiden. Total sin points: 48. What a pity. The heavenly secret pathmaster looked at Ji Yunan, who had been completely crushed into a pile of flesh, and sighed softly. The king of the deep sea also looked in that direction, but he only snorted coldly and said, "You overestimate yourself." Now that the Buddha had reappeared in the human world, even the Deep Sea King himself would not dare to intervene, let alone instruct others to do so. Whether the other party became a demon or a Buddha had nothing to do with him, the Deep Sea King. The heavenly mystery pathmaster dared to intervene because it was related to his opportunity to achieve Tao. With the Tao in front of him, he naturally dared to take any risks. As for that brat who snatched the world stone, a mere transcendent actually dared to make a move against the 10,000 worlds Buddha. He must be tired of living. However, at this moment, the Deep Sea King also understood what the mysterious pathmaster was doing. In fact, the whole thing was very simple. The heavenly mystery Tao Lord had found the reincarnated body of the 10,000 worlds Buddha, so he had used the fate of a region to awaken her. That was all. No matter how profound the situation was, as long as the mastermind's goal was found, everything would become logical. Before knowing the existence of the 10,000 worlds Buddha, no matter if it was Ji Yunan, the other 5 pathmasters, or even the White Mist, they could not understand what the mysterious pathmaster was doing. 9,000 worlds of Buddha have been destroyed. What a shame. The mysterious pathmaster looked at the girl in midair, who was floating toward the purple cloud. He shook his head and sighed. The reincarnation of the 10,000 worlds Buddha. Every life, he was a person with a deep connection to Buddha. Every life, he died to worship Buddha. With the accumulation of the 10,000 worlds Buddha, if he could reincarnate and wake up, he would be a Buddha among Buddhas. It was a shame that the mysterious Pathmaster had destroyed it. The accumulation of the 10,000 worlds Buddha was not purified by the Buddha. One could imagine the result. You should think about yourself first. The Deep-Sea King looked at him strangely and said. The mysterious Pathmaster laughed and said, when the Buddha completely wakes up, it will be the day I step into the break world. When that happens, I will be able to return to Shanghai Pavilion in one breath. I don't think she will be able to catch up. Perhaps it was because the opportunity to become a Buddha had finally arrived, and his long-cherished wish had finally been fulfilled. Even the mysterious Pathmaster relaxed his guard. When he spoke, he was not as careful as he used to be. Of course, the Deep-Sea King knew his background, so there was no need for him to be careful. The girl in the sky flew higher and higher. The symbol between her eyebrows turned purple. Her black hair grew longer. Then, it reached her waist. Her clothes changed. She wore a black robe. She sat cross-legged on the purple cloud. The purple cloud disappeared. It revealed a giant black lotus. The girl was sitting on it. The lotus was still spinning. The purple light in the girl's eyes started to dim. When it completely disappeared, she looked like a normal person. Then, she looked at the mysterious Pathmaster and the Deep-Sea King. She nodded at the Deep-Sea King. Then, she looked at the mysterious Pathmaster and said, I will go to Shanghai Pavilion to make them pay for this. The mysterious Pathmaster looked like he did not care. He bowed and said, I and the 3 pavilion leaders will be waiting for you. The young woman gave a cold harumph, but said nothing more. However, it was at this moment that someone suddenly called out. Don't go. The girl looked to the side. It was Yi Chen who was in a daze. The latter's face was pale. No one knew what he was thinking. He mumbled, don't go, you helped me wake up with your luck. Although it wasn't my wish, it's still karma. She looked down at the ground and waved her hand to scatter a black lotus. This can help you break through the limit of luck and break through the realm. As expected of the Buddha of all ages. Even though she had just woken up, she could give people a treasure that could help them break through the realm. Meanwhile, Yi Chen only stared blankly. He did not react even when the black lotus landed in his arms. He kept saying those 3 words. At that moment, he had a splitting headache. There seemed to be something in his mind that wanted to jump out, but he could not recall it. He instinctively felt that it had something to do with the girl. If he let her go, he would definitely regret it. However, the black lotus in his arms seemed to weigh millions of kilograms. Just by landing in Yi Chen's arms, it pressed down on him to the point that he could not move. He could not even speak loudly. His obviously unusual action made the Deep-Sea King fall silent. He looked at the mysterious Pathmaster strangely, but the latter only smiled faintly and said nothing. The girl sat on the black lotus again and raised her eyes to the sky as if she was announcing something to the heavens. From today onwards, the Buddha of all ages is dead. I control the Buddhist path of reincarnation. From today onwards, the Buddhas of all ages will not enter reincarnation. Their bodies will disappear when they die. From today onwards, my name has no return. The girl, or rather, the demon Buddha of no return, announced to the heavens. Her voice instantly resounded throughout the entire Shenhuang planet. Everyone heard it. However, at that moment, a faint voice came from the direction of a pile of rotten meat. Chapter 165. Let's rewind time to a moment ago. The moment he read the information about the evil god's temple, Ji Yunan's consciousness directly escaped into it, opened the game interface as fast as he could, and chose to level up. The 1000 Buddha True Daughter event was the fastest event that Ji Yunan had ever experienced, but the reward was quite generous. He actually took a risk. If the reward given by the evil event didn't exceed 42 sin points, then he might have really become a pile of mud. Fortunately, the content of the event attacking a grade 4 powerhouse instantly raised the difficulty infinitely, and gave a generous reward. Now Ji Yunan had 506 sin points, 2,600 points, and the cost of leveling up was just right. The process of leveling up to grade 4 was even stranger than Ji Yunan had imagined. As a grade 3 profound meaning, swap became Ji Yunan's first exclusive law, and it directly became his main skill after reaching grade 4. Under the indescribable power of the law, Ji Yunan's understanding of shadow was rapidly increasing, and he finally stepped into the ranks of grade 4. Fortunately, Ji Yunan had experience in the game in his previous life. Although the essence of the law needed to be slowly understood, he knew how to use it. In terms of pure use, those Star Lords might not be better than him. Grade 4. Ji Yunan sat on the throne of the evil god's temple, and shadow bodies began to appear around him. Swap. When Ji Yunan stabbed with his sword, over 10 shadow bodies turned into his appearance and stabbed with the same sword, but there was a slight difference between the beginning and the end. After reaching grade 4, the swap law was no longer that simple, and it had more extensions. The shadow bodies were all replaced by Ji Yunan at different times. In the interval between his sword attacks, a shadow body would replace his body every second, turning into a real existence. Turning illusions into reality, this kind of creation ability, was the power of grade 4. At a certain moment after the young girl, Wu Gui, bestowed the Black Lotus and declared to the heavens, as soon as Ji Yunan's voice fell, a shadow suddenly rose into the sky. The young girl's gaze slowly shifted in that direction. The heavenly mystery pathmaster looked back in astonishment, but the Deep Sea King's reaction was faster than the two of them. In an instant, he had already soared into the sky. This wasn't because he was vigilant, but because the dense killing intent coming from not far away forced him to react. Countless figures of Ji Yunan appeared beside the King of the Deep Sea at the same time. Every one of them was real, and every sword was filled with fatal killing intent. Ji Yunan, the King of the Deep Sea, roared. His body suddenly expanded, and the anchor on his shoulder fell down heavily. The terrifying tremors seemed to shatter space itself. Ji Yunan's shadow bodies naturally shattered, but at the same time, more shadow bodies crawled out from the shadow of the King of the Deep Sea. The King of the Deep Sea's gaze turned cold. He finally realized that he couldn't fight with his opponent, so he risked this wave of attacks to escape with his life. His hands tore open the void, and without a word, he wanted to jump in. But behind him, he was stabbed by dozens of swords from Ji Yunan. Facing the shadow swords, the armor on his body was like paper, and was instantly pierced through. The dozens of swords all entered his body, and fresh blood gushed out. Roar. The King of the Deep Sea let out a beast-like roar, and at the same time, the aura of an ancient beast appeared. As a blood descendant, the King of the Deep Sea's bloodline was originally half non-human. But in the end, he suppressed the impulse deep in his bloodline, and didn't choose to turn back to fight. Instead, he fled into the void crack, and no one knew which plane he had escaped to. The shadow bodies that filled the sky slowly retracted, and once again turned into Ji Yunan, standing where the King of the Deep Sea had been. You sure run fast. Ji Yunan laughed coldly, but he didn't care. After all, they were both level 4 powerhouses. When it came to escaping, they naturally had their own abilities, and it would be difficult to completely stop the other. But after taking dozens of his swords, the King of the Deep Sea would probably not be able to recover without a few decades of cultivation, and would he give him time to recover? The monk could run, but the temple could not. The Tianji Pathmaster was dumbfounded. No matter what, the King of the Deep Sea was a veteran world breaker. He was a powerhouse that had been given a planetary level star seal by the Shanghai Pavilion, and yet he had escaped? On the other side, Ji Yunan's gaze had already shifted to him. The Tianji Pathmaster felt like he was being stared at by a poisonous snake, and his back was inexplicably cold. He quickly waved his hand and said, "Friend Ji Yu, we have no enmity, how about?" Without hesitation, Ji Yunan slashed down with his sword. Why talk so much nonsense? Only those who could not be killed had the right to talk about conditions. Layers of shadow swords appeared again, and this sword was divided into hundreds of moments. Every moment, a Ji Yunan would be replaced, participating in the attack on the Tianji Pathmaster. This kind of infinite duplication method made the Tianji Pathmaster's scalp go numb. He was not the King of the Deep Sea, and he did not have the ability to resist, so he just let himself be chopped into minced meat. The attack from a level 4 powerhouse was not that easy to endure. Even though this was not the Tianji Pathmaster's original body, the shadow power directly followed the line of rules and extended to his original body. A muffled groan came from the starry sky, and then there was a spatial fluctuation. It was the Tianji Pathmaster who had left. Just as he had said before, he went directly to the central starfield's Xinghai pavilion. Only there would he feel safer. Another one. Ji Nan still had a cold smile on his face. He was not afraid of these level 4 powerhouses running away, because these people had their own routes. As long as they were not alone, sooner or later, he would kill them until they had no choice but to show themselves. Feng Shu, Ping Zhoushan, and Ping Zhoushan, who were originally beside the king of the deep sea, saw Ji Nan turn his head and wanted to beg for mercy, but a sword pierced their hearts at the same time. After killing the 3 of them, Ji Nan finally looked at young lady No Return, the person who had almost turned him into minced meat in one move. She was also looking at him coldly, because it was Ji Nan's sword that forced her to make a decision in advance, allowing the demonic intent to gain the upper hand, causing her to end up in such a state. Both sides had enmity, and naturally, the result was a huge fight. The shadow appeared once again, and countless swords pointed towards the young lady. Young Lady No Return lightly patted the black lotus beneath her, and the demonic intent instantly swept over. Catcher! Something seemed to shatter in the void, and Ji Nan's shadow was swept away, and Wu Gui's demonic intent also dissipated. Both sides were actually tied. However, at this moment, another 2 auras descended. It was a man and a woman, walking out of the void. The man and woman both had pointed ears, fair skin, and looked somewhat similar. At this moment, the man spoke with a gloomy face. The 2 of you came uninvited, and entered my mysterious yellow star. Do you want us siblings to play host? Chapter 166. These 2 people were the rulers of planet Shenhuang. They were the first 2 Breakworld elites there. Luo Jie and Luo Fei, the brother and sister, were famous Breakworld elites in the surrounding astral worlds. Their fame came from their obsession with territory. They always thought of planet Shenhuang as their own territory. They were very xenophobic, so when they saw Ji Nan and the girl, No Return, their attitude was very bad. In fact, it was not just Ji Nan and the girl. If any Breakworld elite entered the 6th system without warning, they would be treated with hostility. That kind of behavior was very unique. Most Breakworld people did not care about territory. In this world, power belonged to oneself. As long as oneself was unharmed, one could easily build up their territory. There was nothing to care about. The one who spoke to Ji Nan and the girl was the older brother, Luo Jie. The little sister, Luo Fei, stepped forward and said, "You 2 should leave planet Shenhuang immediately. We can pretend this never happened." Otherwise, before she could finish her sentence, Ji Nan had already slashed at her with his sword. Layers of shadows appeared again. This time, the target was Luo Fei. The girl, No Return, attacked at the same time. She waved her hand and unleashed a palm strike. It was supposed to be a Buddha palm strike, but now, it carried an endless amount of demon air. It looked very scary. Her target was her brother, Luo Jie. She wanted Luo Jie to be unable to save Luo Fei. After unleashing that palm strike, No Return turned around and left. She did not hesitate at all. Those who could become Breakworld elites were not stupid. Luo Jie immediately understood what she meant. She was sure his sister would be killed. At the very least, she would be badly injured. That was the only way for her to stop him. That was the only way she could provoke hatred between him and the other person. That way, she would be able to leave. Luo Jie's brain suddenly understood all of this. He blocked the girl's attack and coldly smiled. If he thought his sister would be defeated that easily, then he was too. There was a scream behind him. Luo Jie looked back in disbelief. He saw Luo Fei had been hit by a dozen swords. Every sword landed on the same spot. It was supposed to be Luo Fei's heart. After she dodged it, it became her abdomen. But how powerful was Ji Nan's sword? Even the king of the deep sea, a bloodkin, was heavily injured in an instant. After advancing to rank 4, while Swap had become Ji Nan's exclusive rule, the strengthening of his body itself was not to be underestimated. The Tier 4 evil god's body had practically reached a jaw-dropping level. Ji Nan could even contend against Tier 3 laws with his physical strength alone. And the special use of the displacement law gave him the ability to multiply his attacks by dozens of times. Ji Nan's real body, which was replaced by the shadow body, attacked at the same time, so their movements were exactly the same. The moment the first Ji Nan stabbed Luo Fei, the second Ji Nan also stabbed her, followed by the third, the fourth. The nature of the shadow body allowed the Ji Nan clones to overlap, as if they were one person. This was because Ji Nan's control over displacement had improved. He could no longer separate the shadow bodies. So in the eyes of outsiders, it seemed that he had defeated Luo Fei with just one strike. What they did not know was that each of Ji Nan's attacks was dozens of times more critical. It might be complicated to explain, but to Luo Jie, the whole thing was very simple. His sister had been seriously injured by one strike. With Ji Nan's terrifying strength, the fact that Luo Fei did not die instantly was already the result of her noble core rule. But even so, her body still fell slowly. Die! Luo Jie roared angrily. A bolt of lightning suddenly fell from the sky, directly striking Ji Nan's head. This bolt of law lightning directly shattered a large expanse of space, revealing a pitch-black void. Its might was so powerful that it was indescribable. If it was Ji Nan when he was at rank 3, this lightning would be enough to severely injure him to the brink of death. But when it was placed on Ji Nan now, he didn't even blink his eyes, and he allowed the thunderclap to descend onto his head without the slightest injury. The strength of a level 4 evil god body was hard to imagine. After the loud noise, Ji Nan slowly walked out of the dust. When he looked at where Luo Jie and his sister were, there was no one there. It is no wonder they are world breakers. They run faster than the last. Ji Nan coldly laughed. He did not care. After reaching level 4, everyone had the power to tear space. It was very difficult to kill each other. That was why world breakers rarely fought each other. No one could kill the other, so what was the point of fighting? It was also not convenient to attack the enemy's faction. If you destroyed someone else's faction, they could destroy you. World breakers could not always guard their territory. There was always a chance someone could find them. Regarding the current situation, Ji Nan did not care. He had just leveled up. He had ways to deal with these people in the future. In the game, many players studied how to kill NPCs that could run away. The source is damaged. I cannot use my body to travel across the system. Let's see where you can run to. Mr. When Ji Nan arrived at the headquarters of the White Mist again, Red Tail showed more respect than usual. For those who were observant, what happened in the Central Mountains was not a secret. Deep Sea King appeared, a Buddha's reincarnation woke up, Sky Secret Pathmaster became a world breaker, and the two leaders of planet Shenhuang appeared. Red Tail had been on planet Shenhuang for many years, but she had not seen as many world breakers. More importantly, those world breakers had all been defeated by Ji Nan, who had just leveled up. It is no wonder he is the fastest person to level up in history. Red Tail had a wry smile. She knew what Xinghai Pavilion said about Ji Nan. Take over planet Shenhuang and control all the starship's landing points. If you cannot control them, destroy them all. When Ji Nan said that, a small, black sword appeared. It landed in Red Tail's hand. This has my rule power sealed inside. Ordinary Pathmasters cannot take a hit from it. Red Tail hurriedly took the small sword. It seemed ordinary, but she could not do anything to the small sword even if she exerted a little force in her palm. She did not dare be distracted. She looked at Ji Nan and said, "Mister, those two have a training ground here. Do you want to, where?" Ji Nan raised his eyebrows. Those two were Luo Jie and Luo Fei, the brother and sister. He did not know those two had a tradition.